OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
7:30 Friday morning, OTB AM. Adrian here, Shane there. Good morning to you, Shane.
Morning, Adrian. Morning, folks.
That shirt is again an abomination. Fair play to you.
Jojo likes it.
You also seem to have like a wardrobe full of these things.
Oh, they're like
there doesn't seem to be a lot on repeat. Like,
yeah, I've only just moved back up to Dublin, so I actually have to bring up the vast majority of
more to come.
Oh, like I've only scraped the.
Where are you getting them?
The iceberg here. Proper quality clothes stores, Adrian.
Like
charity shops do kind of this kind of field, you know.
Stuff from the 60s. Like.
Yeah. It's it's a Friday feel.
How would you, for people who are
it's light and airy
this morning?
It's kind of like something from Narcos.
It's not the
maybe.
material that I'm so concerned about. It's just
it's
an abomination. Like
it is kind of. It's like a 1980s Mexican cartel leader kind of vibe.
Is there any sort of a shirt that you wouldn't wear?
There probably isn't.
You just whatever's going like.
Yeah, that the level of shirt I wouldn't wear is certainly a. No, I wouldn't be picky with a shirt, as you can tell.
The statement is blindly obvious this morning.
Yeah.
So we were so much to get to this morning. We've another packed show for you coming your way over the next couple of hours. The Munster match we need to touch on off the top because it's just something so special about Munster. What would you call them? Like that sort of exhibition game with that touring party, like that obviously speaks to history at the club. And I was at the Maori game a few years ago down there, and like you're sort of turning up. Not really. There's a real like Paddy Patterson was talking about it after the game last night. He was talking about a lot of stuff.
He did.
He was using lots of fruity language that we might not sort of repeat this morning.
Of course.
But there was that sort of element of the pressure being off, and it's been at the Maori game a few years ago in Thomond Park. It definitely felt like that with the crowd going in. There wasn't that anticipation of needing a result or the outcome or whatever. It was like it's an exhibition game and everybody's excited about it as an event. And they certainly seem to replicate that in double the numbers at Páirc Uí Chaoimh last night.
I was surprised when they said that the pressure was off. I was like, Jesus. Because before the game I was like, well, the pressure's on here. You've got 41,000 sellout of fans at a game that, look, is historic, regardless of, it's not a URC game that means something in terms of points, but these players will remember that night for the rest of their lives. They knew that in advance of the game, and Roundtree even said it to them apparently before the match that right. I wish I was in your position, So there was a weight of expectation, you'd imagine, but they stood up to it. I mean, and like you talk about the occasion, I remember that was it the last 5 minutes they won the scrum penalty inside their own 22 and just the absolute release of emotion, and then you hear them all chanting Munster in the crowd and the fields of Athenry, and Zombie comes on after the match. There was a special feel to it.
Oh, there was, like you say. I mean, look at that last scrum turnover and the 5 minutes that followed, where there was like little wins within that, where it felt like everyone felt like, okay, that's the one that means we're getting over the line, and then suddenly South Africa get the ball back. But that was a real, and that, like the hugging, the tour on the pitch after the game, the interviews afterwards. It was clear, like really what it meant to them, and you just have to hope. And there was a lot of chat that was filling, obviously, the analysis of the game afterwards, that like this needs to be the point where they play Connacht in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah,
that
push on.
It's it's fine, and like it is obviously a thing that goes down in history, and it's yet another big one of these events that Munster have come out on the right side of. But like ultimately, I do think a big part of the narrative was that, like, Jackie Dunne, who was talking after us, that was the first block of games. It was the end of the first block of games. It was the end of the first block of training. It was a new system. People were starting to get up to speed. That it wasn't like, oh, we've just upped our game so much to come and beat South Africa. That, like, no, this is us. We're here now.
Yes.
And we've landed.
That's where they belong.
You just have to hope that, when Connacht come to town and when the games that follow, that actually, and look, it's not to say, I'm sure there'll be more blips in the road. There has to be.
They have to push on from here. Like. They just have to. And I think Roundtree was kind of keen to stress that after the game. They'll enjoy this for what it is. But when you think of all the players that they had missing, like no Bear, no Murray, no Casey, it's not a South African solid starting usual 15, but it's a very, very strong South African A team. And like even our own Stephen Kisby-Green was quite confident heading down last night. Like when he saw the South African team versus the Munster lineout, you're thinking, well, he was certainly thinking this is a South African team that should get a win.
Well, look at, and the thing is, we're glossing over the fact that South Africa had a hatful of tries that were like literally a centimetre from being over the line, and like a couple of those started to go their way, and a bit of momentum swings. So it wasn't like, look at, I know the scoreline suggested a fairly big gap, but it didn't feel like that really in terms of the game.
No, to see, and then like the likes of Simon Zebo scoring a goal or scoring a try in the, like, as a Cork man, I can only imagine how special that would be. Like we talked about it to Tomas O'Leary yesterday, talking about the what it might do for rugby in Cork. Because I mean, it's clearly massive in Limerick, and it's big in Cork anyway. But there is that split.
More of it back down to Cork will be
possibly
one certain outcome of this. I mean, like if you can get 41,000 jammed in there, like will they turn out for a URC game? Will they turn out? I'm sure they will turn out for, like, as a high profile Heineken Cup game coming up down the tracks.
Yeah.
Surely they turn out for that. Like, I mean, that, I know it's funny, having lived through the time where Munster were split between Cork and Limerick, and there was a huge amount of conflict about that at that time, that they essentially had created by design two different camps. And a big part of the success of modern Munster is that they've put all that into one, and everybody accepts that it's not two camps anymore. If you're playing for Munster, you're based in Limerick, and that's just the way it is.
Yes.
Having lived through all of that, done all of that, to be kind of suggesting that, well, it wouldn't be bad actually if they went back up the road. I still have to stand by the fact that, looking at that last night, it wouldn't be bad if they went back up the road a couple of times this season.
They could go to Páirc Uí Chaoimh plenty more after that last night. I mean, the atmosphere seemed to be brilliant through the TV. You could feel it.
Yeah.
And that was one thing I suppose there was no doubt that the atmosphere was going to be good, because we've spoken about it all week, that, ordinarily it's a GEA match in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and the support is split. Even if it is Cork against, say, Tip, the support is fairly split down the middle. For a game like that last night, where you have overwhelming support for Munster, it just creates something around the stadium that you couldn't get elsewhere. You get it in Thomond Park, of course, but there was the novelty factor, and even Roundtree saying before the game, didn't want the players to walk out onto the pitch and even train there before the game.
Okay.
The kickers obviously got their chance to kind of kick and get used to the stadium, but wanted the players' first feeling of walking out there to be too zombie as they were walking out for the match, which added to probably the sense of occasion for the players. Like, they must have been just sitting in the dressing room here in the crowd going, this is different. And there were players as well who wouldn't have got the opportunity if those internationals with Munster were all there. So you're looking around at some of the players, even when they're like shaking hands with the South Africans at the end of the game. Usually when you're shaking hands with the losing team, I guess you're trying to stay composed and keep your face straight, but they couldn't wipe the smile off their faces. It was just...
And it represents a big chance, of course, and an opportunity to have proved themselves on that sort of a level as well, on a personal level.
100%.
Richard Redballs in touch said 41,000 bandwagoners like most of the Cork rugby fans, which is quite a point of comment. But the reality is, listen, for any game like that, like, you can't tell me that the 45,000 that turned up for Leinster Munster a couple of weeks ago at the Aviva, they're hard. They weren't. Sorry, I was at the game, and there's plenty of people around me who rarely go to a game, have not much of appreciation of what's going on the pitch. Who cares? You need them to turn up. Like the 82,000 that turn up for an All-Ireland final. There are plenty of bandwagoners there. You can't fill stadiums without bandwagoners, Richard Redballs. That's the reality.
That's fair.
I wouldn't be too...
I mean, for most people at All-Ireland finals, it's their first game of the championship. I wouldn't say for most, but for a lot of people. Well, all the neutral fans, for sure. Yeah. Because there's a lot of tickets to go to.
It can be.
Neutral county. So last night, I'm sure it was the first game of the season for a lot of Munster fans. But
yeah.
So what?
You do want to see the fans who want a ticket to be able to get to the game. I think there's no, like, the proper fans who are there for the McGrath Cup or whatever you're having yourself.
Yeah.
But, like, having said that, you just don't fill those stadiums without all the bandwagoners.
You remember your first game? Like, I remember my first game for the Republic of Ireland national football team, and it was against Andorra in a World Cup qualifier in 01, and you never forget that. But imagine those Munster kids going there last night, and forevermore their first game was we beat South Africa in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Who cares if it was South Africa? Those facts will be lost in the realms of history, but it just was a magical moment. And for anyone under the age of 12 there, like that, what a special occasion to be part of.
I brought my two eldest two to the Munster-Leinster game at the Aviva, so I'm sort of, it wasn't their first game by any stretch of the imagination.
They were wearing blue, of course, though.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Why would they be wearing anything else?
Well, yeah, fair enough. That was a sense of occasion as well. But those, as you said, you're not going to come anywhere close to a sold-out stadium without.
You're not.
A large majority of fair weather fans.
We've lots to come. We're going to touch on United in a second as well, but here's a bit of a flavour of what's coming up on the show for you this morning. As I said, it is a stack show. Shane Keegan's going to come into us in a few minutes' time, and he's going to talk to us about the Republic of Ireland squad, obviously named during the week. We might get his thoughts on United as well, and a few other bits and bobs too. Martin Lipton will talk to us about the England squad that was named yesterday. A couple of maybe smallish kind of surprises, but an interesting dynamic nonetheless. So we'll get into the teeth of that, including Marcus Rashford, who continues to kick the lights out again last night, and the chances of him starting for England in the World Cup. We'll tell you what's happening across the back pages about 8:30. Alan Quinlan, we'll have much more chat about Porky Queeve with him last night, and obviously the Fiji game to look ahead to as well. So plenty there. And Siobhán Doyle, who has written this cracker little book. It's called History of the GAA in 100 Objects. That's the one, and it's a great read that you can pick up every now and then and dip into, and it does exactly what it says in the tin. So that'll be coming your way just after 9 this morning. So we'll bring all that to you. United last night, Shane. They're back, and I mean they kind of are.
Yeah, like,
are they?
First half was putrid, and then the second half really came into life. I mean, reacting to adversity as well, scoring 19 seconds after Villa had scored, which is something you don't see United. Usually the heads go down and whatever else, and to compare it to last Sunday's game at Villa Park was just apples and oranges. I mean, it was completely different performance. Anthony Martial, and Peter Schmeichel pointed this out after the game, Anthony Martial worked really hard for his goal. Like, he ran forward waiting for Bruno's ball in, and that's not something you see from Anthony Martial ever. Like, hard work has never been his forte. So to see him in form, Marcus Rashford was imperious. He was brilliant. And look, maybe the play in the day, the England squad is named for the World Cup, filled him with confidence maybe, but
the goal that he took,
I took it so well.
But the way that he took it, there was 3 or 4 things that could have easily gone wrong, right? And nobody would have said, that was, geez, if only just
strength.
Nobody would have blamed him too much for it, because like, there was it Mings firing himself across it, like who knows what happens there, but the little deft touches, the speed of thought that it took to react in that exact instant, and the quality of the composure to stop and take the finish. That lad is, I'm not sure I've ever seen him play with such confidence. Yeah,
he took it remarkably well, and he's stronger. I was saying to you before we come on air, like, he looks to me like he's been in the gym quite a bit. He looks stronger. He looks more mentally there as well. He's in a good place, I think. You see Alejandro Garnacho come on for the last half hour, and he's brilliant. 2 assists. Like, his ball in from McTominay's goal in injury time was incredible. He just has confidence, and he was crap in Villa Park last week, but then he comes back and bounces back and makes his half hour worthwhile. There's probably a couple of downsides. I think the Donny van de Beek project is over. Like, he started the last 3 games just by chance, because there's been injuries or players out that he ordinarily wouldn't be ahead of. That project, I think, needs to come to an end. I feel sorry for Van de Beek. He seems like a nice guy, and he went off to Everton, and like,
Jesus.
I know.
Donny wakes up this morning and he's flicking through his Twitter feed, and we pop up and he's like,
I'm a nice guy.
Geez, your man in the shirt is saying I'm a nice guy.
Yeah,
this
dodgy shirted Irishman.
It's time to leave.
Yeah, but I would, like, what I mean by that is, like, I was at Old Trafford for United 0 Liverpool 5 last season, and I was in the press box, and all the fans in the stadium were gone, and the one man left on the pitch doing runs upon runs with the United fitness coach was Donny van de Beek, and he hadn't got on, and other unused substitutes weren't doing what he was doing, and he was out. Like, he has a work ethic, and you see that he's trying really hard, but he's not technically talented enough to play for United.
We talk about Rashford been reacting to the confidence that's flowing through him at the minute.
I mean,
Well, Van de Beek has never really been given the proper. He might have hoped with Ten Hag coming in that, great, this is going to be, we'll get a connection here, and this will be my time to shine. And it hasn't really happened for him. And now he's been thrown a few games, not really by his own design.
No.
In that environment, like, it is very difficult. He never, when the auditor was in, the auditor wasn't giving him a look in either.
No.
And what does that, like, his confidence must be on the floor after a couple of years of that.
Yeah, and look, I've been a big proponent of him. I've been like, give him time, he needs a chance and a proper run in the team, but he's had a couple of those. It's over now. Like, I don't know where he's headed, but
Donny,
unfortunately it's into the sunset.
Twitter feed now.
Yeah, it's into the sunset for Donny. Like, I don't know where he's going. And even Ronaldo, illness last night kept him out of the squad, with very good timing, wasn't it?
Reasons that there was like that swing in 3 or 4 days.
Well, there you go. You wouldn't know.
Is that too much of a stretch? Like, him not being there?
Potentially, because he started against Villa last weekend. And
that's what I mean, like.
Yeah, maybe. But then a couple of games before that, he was good. Do you know? So it's just one of those things.
I think get him out of there, Shane.
Yeah, potentially
Busted flush.
And like, I don't think he would like
a cod.
He's a cod. Yeah. I don't know what. Look, illness. The second last game before the World Cup, when he is completely focused on the Portugal assault on that tournament. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he happens to still be sick on Sunday for the Fulham game. Do you know?
All right.
He's
one of those. It's one of those. I think
his brain's on the plane.
If we were on Talksport, we'd say no. It's one of those.
Yeah.
Donica McGagan, good morning to you, Donica. Says the National Cup final Lansdowne Road this Sunday, lads. If you're stuck for something to talk about after the rugby friendlies in the English League Cup, it's a fair point. And I should have mentioned when we're talking to Shane, obviously a little bit with Shane Keegan, we'd be talking to him about that, of course. Oisin Brady says the match was great, but the big screen needs upgrading. I'm assuming he's talking about last night. It's ridiculously small. Wouldn't look out of place in your living room, Adrian. I mean, I think he's doing my living room a serious service there. But if you were at the game last night, send us in your thoughts. Would you go back for more rugby, more different sports at Páirc Uí Chaoimh? Certainly seems to be the general response to it last night. One of the other things we wanted to mention, Shane, top of the show today, it definitely caught my eye during the week, was the John Aldridge comments. He was on with Robbie Fowler and Nathan at a show during the week, and he was talking about, like, why is there not a statue of Jack Charlton at the Aviva?
Yeah.
And it was I've never once considered before the idea of having any statue at the Aviva Stadium, and then suddenly it was like, when, as soon as it's said, you're like, how has nobody mentioned that before? Why is this not a real central topic of conversation for somebody who was who did so much, who transcended the sport?
Yeah.
Like very few other people have. It was like, right, that actually, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And a Jack Charlton statue would work anywhere in Ireland. It would work anywhere in the middle of Dublin as well. But Aviva Stadium is the obvious place to put it. So the obvious then thing was like, well, so if we were to start off with, let's say, 4 statues at the Aviva Stadium, like, I know we're not going to go and get them all minted in one fell swoop, but like, if we put a bit of a plan in place for 4 statues at the Aviva Stadium, and who would they be? What pose would they have? And also, like, I think the only sort of advisory around it would be like that you want to have people who will stand the test of time, like that. It's not that they've achieved he's thinking, oh, who did I put on my list? The ones I've put on my list from last night, it could be.
I think that, like, you just don't want their achievements at some point to be surpassed, right? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I do. So like, at that point then it's like, okay, that person who achieved that thing, well, now that's done, and so that's been surpassed, and so we automatically have to put on a statue with the new. It's a bit of it's a hard one to get right, like. Yeah, okay, so I had to think about this. I had to think about this last night, and if I was to pick 4, you split it halfway between soccer and, rugby, don't you? I mean, there's no doubt there. There's going to be a hell of a lot of recency bias in this. A hell of a lot. Who are your 4? So I was thinking in football, I agree with Jack Charlton. Look, that's hardly controversial. Yeah. You have to put him down. And Paul McGrath, Ireland's greatest ever player. Johnny Giles is probably unlucky to miss out. And then in the rugby terms, I've gone for Brian O'Driscoll and Paul O'Connell, titans of the game, right? Wow. But then I was thinking, okay, if you want to make statues of moments, and I actually think this would be, you've put me off by saying people who stand the test of time, but I think if you're going to pick 4 statues that sum up 4 moments that made the Aviva Stadium or Lansdowne Road come alive, you're doing a statue of McAteer against the Dutch. Well, it's a shout. Wheeling away. You're doing a statue. So you're essentially coming up with 8 statues. Is that what you're doing? This is my preferred 4. Okay, at the moment. That's my preferred 4. So what is your actual? Are you going for McAteer? I'm going for McAteer. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm going for moments as opposed to people. Jesus, right. Now, obviously, McAteer doesn't stand the test of time in comparison to McGrath or Charlton. I get that. So I'm going with that. I'm going with the Shane Long's strike going past Manuel Neuer. So some sort of pose there. Yeah. Well, you'd need 2 statues there. You'd need Neuer, like, you do. You kind of need the stretch, wouldn't you? You do. You do. Just to add to it, you're going to need Stockdale's try against the All Blacks. You have to. Ireland beat the All Blacks in that stadium. Stockdale lit the place alight, and you're going to have. So I was trying to think of the other big moments. Peter O'Mahony's line-out steal in 2017 against England to stop them winning the Grand Slam. That was the 13-9 game. Mightn't be as famous a moment as the other 3, but just the image of Peter O'Mahony jumping up, stealing a line out would be quite a intimidating statue, and one I'd like to think England fans visiting for a Six Nations game would have a little moment and go, oh Jesus, a little shudder at the thought of it. Now you could have a tiny little statue somewhere in a hidden corner of Ryan Crotty going over the line in the corner. Oh, no, we wouldn't have that. We don't really want that.
So I'm going to go with Stockdale, Shane Long, McAteer and Peter O'Mahony, and then obviously one of Jack Charlton as the bonus fifth.
No, you've gone for 5 there. That was not. You've totally
Fifth
misunderstood the assignment.
I have, yeah.
I mean, the moments thing. I mean, I get you. And the McAteer one was definitely one that jumped to mind for me, where you're like, oh, that really was.
Has to be.
But I think it's more about. I've focused less on moments for mine and more about people. And Jack, you just can't get past. I think there's. I think if you were to do up a survey, if you were to survey the country, and maybe that's not a bad idea. Survey the country about who should have a statue there. I think Big Jack there, because he totally transcended everything and did so much for that sport in this country and brought us to glory days.
Yeah,
so we never have the Walkinstown roundabout.
Put it there.
That's actually not the worst shot I've
Right in the middle of the Walkinstown roundabout.
Anyway, we're putting him. He's a banker. Right, and I think the pose is leaning on the dugout. Was it Stuttgart 88? Was it? And there was a real, not even a trickle, but like a raw emotion about him at that point, given who they were playing and the Ray Houghton goal.
Chills.
I think that sort of like arms folded, kind of leaning against the dugout with the flat cap on and a bit of a emotional look in his face. If you can capture that in a statue,
fair. No, I agree.
Robbie Keane, I think he's got to be there. I think that it's certainly one that challenges the idea that the feat could be surpassed at some point, but I do think that it'll stand the test of time. The goals, looking back at it yesterday, he scored a couple of goals against Malta. The first goals he scored at Lansdowne Road in 98, and they were very typical of what became Robbie Keane. One was like a real poacher's goal, 3 yards out on the turn, bit of a flick into the net.
So that's the era you want.
Coming at the box at an angle and passing a couple of players and passing the ball into lovely little goal
in the cartwheel pose.
And then he did the cartwheel afterwards. I don't think he'll have the cartwheel pose. I think it's more of him leaning back, taking a shot.
Oh, I think you have to do the cartwheel
but then
pose.
he'd be upside down.
Well, do him as he's just coming up from the cartwheel. I don't know how you do that. I'm no sculptor, but
So I think you'd have Robbie Keane, right? He scored 40 times at Lansdowne Road as well, and I think you have him in that leaning back pose. Brian O'Driscoll, I agree with. What do you say about this guy? Just like the absolute all-rounder of an Irish rugby player. Yeah. I'd have him probably slightly ahead of Paul O'Connell in the list of who should have a statue at the Aviva. I think that the tries, the line breaks, the inspiration, the turnovers, forward play a lot of the time, inspirational leader and a serial winner as well later in his career. In terms of the pose, there's a lot of options here, but I think something of him breaking a tackle is probably captures him.
Yeah, holding out the hand with the ball in his chest.
Something like that, maybe. Or squeezing between two players. Or so I think you've got to go for Brian O'Driscoll. I'm resisting the recency bias and I'm going for Jack Kyle.
Right, yeah,
I think that you do need to have a bit of a tip of the cap, and both my rugby and football list then would have that.
Yeah, one of each kind of thing.
Clearly, very. I certainly have never seen him play. In 1948, Grand Slam winning captain, and by all accounts from everybody who saw him play, was a real inspirational leader on the pitch as much as anything else in terms of his playing style and all that. So
we'll bring some interest. Most young people wouldn't know who Jack Kyle is, so having a statue of him.
I don't think that's important.
Daddy,
I think there's a tip of the cap to the past.
Vera Pauw's obviously going to get one when they win the World Cup.
When they win the World Cup, I think that's inevitable.
Not before time they get to play games.
It'd probably be more likely be Denise or Katie, wouldn't it? That'd be the reality of.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Whoever scores the winner in the World Cup final.
Yeah.
We'll get it.
Exactly. And then Paul McGrath, I think jumping to head the ball clear, maybe something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
These are notable mentions now. I don't mind saying it.
So you're allowed more than 4. I didn't.
No. I've got my 4. I've got my 4 on the list, Shane.
Okay,
very clear. Ray Houghton.
Okay. Yeah.
About to chip Paluca, and Paul O'Connell, Keith Wood.
Yeah.
Deserves a mention for sure.
He does.
Giles was a very good shout, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, Giles will be disappointed not to be there. He'll be gutted with that one. But he's won plenty of awards, and I think we've come up with a decent list.
I think that's not a bad list.
Yeah, that's not bad.
There's loads of shouts coming in, so we're going to loop back to those a little bit later on. One for Roy Keane here as well, who neither of us has mentioned so far.
The handshake with Mike McCarthy, with neither looking at each other. That would be the.
If Buig was here, he'd need to say to be just 4 Cork people, but
it would be. Yeah.
Shane Keegan, good morning to you.
How are you going on, Adrian? I can't believe you're going for Ray Houghton chipping Paluca rather than Ray Houghton scoring against England.
Well, look as a pose, that's it. I mean, they would be slightly different poses. What do you think? Who would you have?
You're pretty good there. Hard. You touched on him there at the end. It would be very, very hard to leave out Paul McGrath in my eyes now. All right, yeah. Jesus, he was absolutely something else, incredible, and just always comes across as such a fantastic fella as well.
Yeah, and transcended the sport as well. Culturally, is just such an icon.
Absolutely, and I think even the book, to be fair, the book with Vincent added to his legacy as well, because it was such an outstanding book. It's rare that somebody of that stature has a book that does their stature justice, you know.
Yeah, we could have him reading the book as a constant marketing.
That's it.
Listen, there's loads to get to. Somebody was making the point earlier on that we need to ask you about the FAI Cup final. Clearly, we'll do that, and the Ireland squad we want to talk to you about as well. Were you watching United last night?
I saw bits of it. All right, yeah, I was kind of flicking around. Look, I wouldn't be reading too much into.
Would you not?
Look, if they had their way, Adrian, they would have had the two results the other way around. Simple as that. Yeah. We all know that. Yeah. You know, they would have took the points last weekend over the win last night. But so the problem with them at the moment, obviously, is they're just that little bit too much Jekyll and Hyde to really properly challenge up around those Champions League spots. They need to develop a little bit more consistency, but at the same time, to be fair, there's no doubt they're moving in the right direction. He has done a pretty good job since he's gone in there. You know, was that like when you talk about that sort of Jekyll and Hyde aspect of it? Like, because I think there's no more than the Munster conversation we were having a bit earlier on. Like every good result or every good performance results in the fans going, "Great, this is it, we've got it now," and then who knows what happens the next time. But obviously, there was a whole pile of selection changes last night from the previous game. Was it down to that, or is there more nuanced tactical aspect to it from what you saw last night? No, look, I think you know, again, it probably was down to that. It's very hard to get cohesion when you're making that many changes. To be honest, I actually thought for an EFL game it was a reasonably strong lineup. In fairness, so he was. I suppose he's got a lot of good players there that he's trying to keep happy, and that will be a big help to them. But on the wider thing with their Jekyll and Hyde, I suppose, they're definitely improved. There's no doubt whatsoever they're improved. I suppose the problem is you still couldn't say you could trust them. You know, like if I was throwing Shane's bet there, if I was throwing a 50 quid on a week's bet, it'd be very rare I'd pick United, because for the 3 out of 4 decent performances they're given, there's always one kind of clanger likely to be thrown in there as well. So it's where obviously you look at City and Arsenal at the moment, and you know, it's almost impossible to see a game in which they're not going to win. The two of them are tipping along so nicely. And that's it. And look, they're not the only one. You know, I was saying to Shane yesterday, I'm a Spurs fan, and you look at Spurs at the moment, and they're in the Champions League positions, they're in the Champions League places at the moment, and they're through to the next round of the current Champions League. And Jesus, there's nothing but doom and gloom around around Spurs fans. So there's not. So they're not the only one, and they are going to make a bit of a burst back at trying to get into those top 4 positions, I would imagine. But I would be very surprised if they managed it, to be honest.
Shane, we should touch on the Republic of Ireland squad named by Stephen Kenny yesterday for these games upcoming against Norway and Malta. Evan Ferguson, I suppose, the standout, and I guess since he played for Bohs at the age of 14, we've been following this man's rise, but not before time. I guess he's one of these players. I think Kenny pointed out yesterday he might need a loan move away in January to really cement a place in the squad, but a really exciting addition.
He is. Look, you were saying follow him since, you know, he had 2 remarkably young debuts. Obviously, he made the Bohs debut at 14, and I think the Brighton debut might have come at, was he still 15? And look, to be honest, in grassroots football circles, it goes back even further than that. I mean, Evan Ferguson came into his Kennedy Cup year with a massive reputation. So he did. Anybody who was going down to the Kennedy Cup, you know, you go down to the Kennedy Cup, you know who you're going to watch most years. You're going to watch Troy Parrott, you know, you're going to watch Jack Byrne, and in Evan Ferguson's year, you were going to watch Evan Ferguson. You know, he was all the talk around the place. His dad is very well known. His dad is a full-time employee of the FAI and a former Super League of Ireland player himself. So the reputation was there. And if I'm honest, Shane, he's always been such a big unit and such a powerful boy that I'll be honest, I maybe thought he might struggle a little bit when he went to England, because in my head, I suppose the way I was thinking is he's a super player, but his main attribute is the fact that he's just a flat track bully. And I was thinking, when he goes to England and he comes up against lads as big and as strong as him, where he's not able to be as much of a flat track bully, will he have the rest of the game that he needs to kick on? And that would have been my question mark. And he's put me in my place, that's for sure, because he's done so well over there. He's been excellent for the 21s in the games that he's played there, and I think that's probably what has him in the senior squad, even though he's not a regular with Brighton. But I mean, he's gone through a couple of managers now at Brighton, and they all seem to have him in and around that first team setup, and you know, coming on as a sub, or you know, featuring in cup games and stuff like that. So he's impressing everybody. He's impressing absolutely everybody. I am surprised that he got in before he's become probably a regular at club level, as you say. I thought maybe a loan deal first. But obviously, Stephen just wants to get him in, get a look at him, see him up close with the standard of player that he has in that squad, and see if he's able for it. But look, he's a tremendous talent, and hopefully you're talking about Robbie Keane's record and how long it stands. I mean, he probably falls into that bracket of people that we're looking at and saying, I wonder over the next 15 years, could he have a rattle at it, you know?
We've had a few of them over the years. Let's not put too much pressure on him.
Yeah, exactly.
I think when the squad obviously gets names, and there's not, maybe outside of Duffy, who's out for personal reasons, and Knight, who hasn't been released by Derby, there's not a huge amount of surprise in it, and we're talking about Ferguson now and, you know, the opportunity to impress. What, from Stephen Kenny's point of view, when you're heading into a couple of games like that, like, the obvious thing is to think that he's going to tinker around with it, but obviously the momentum from the previous game and the fragile nature of international football and maintaining that confidence, there might be a big part of Stephen Kenny that's thinking he doesn't want to meddle around too much, that we might end up seeing the players that we're used to looking at. What do you think? Is there a chance that the likes of Ferguson gets a look in?
Oh no, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Adrian. I can't see there being wholesale changes. I think Stephen's way of getting a look at fellas is going to be how they perform in training. I don't think you're going to see wholesale changes. Lads might get in for the last 10-15 minutes of games, maybe thereabouts, but by and large, look, because that pressure is never too far from his door, you know, in terms of, you know, there are people behind him, there are people against him, all of that kind of thing, and there just seems to be, there's never really a huge amount of breathing space for him, is there? So he needs decent performances, and ideally he needs decent results in these two games. And even just looking beyond these two games, you know, when we come into the new year and you really are back to the results business, you know, does he currently know his strongest starting 11? Does he currently know exactly how he wants to play when we come back into those competitive games? The answer to both those questions is probably no. So he needs to use these two games to nail down that starting 11 and nail down that style of play, rather than messing around with it a little bit. You know, if you had, say, if it was a friendly for England heading into a World Cup, like, England know what their starting 11 is going to be, so they could use one of the other games to try out other fellas. I don't think we're there. I think these games will be very, very much used to bed down how we're going to go about things when the competitive games are back. Remains
to be seen too with whether it's Erling Haaland that the Irish goalkeeper has to face in the first of those friendlies next week. But well,
if it's not Erling Haaland, the Norwegian manager can answer to my young fella, I tell you. Because
yeah, waiting to see him. Yeah,
well, they have a home game that, like, the idea might be that he may not play both games, and if he's going to play one, it's unlikely to be here. But I mean, I'm with you. I think a lot of people will be going for that.
That's for sure. Yeah, we got no Kevin De Bruyne with Belgium. Kem, that was bad enough. Yeah. I'll never get him home in one piece if he doesn't get a glimpse of Hannon.
Yeah, touch wood, he's ready and available. In terms of the goalkeeping position, Shane, like, Quinlan Kelleher again putting his name in the back pages during the week with 3 penalty saves in the shootout for Liverpool. Bazunu clearly has that number one spot until he loses it, but in your opinion, does Kelleher need, like, he's getting the experience, and we've talked about it, of being Alisson's understudy and working with Liverpool, and yet you can't help but feel that maybe at some stage he needs this move away to really cement his place as an Irish number one. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would, to be honest with you. Look, it's brilliant. They obviously adore him at Liverpool, and he constantly seems to be in the limelight anytime he does get an opportunity. But I mean, realistically, there's absolutely no way on earth that Stephen can consider picking him as his regular number one ahead of Gavin Bazunu, who is starting week in, week out in the Premier League. Okay, he's getting it tough. He's in a side that are struggling a little bit, but that's still obviously far superior preparation to sitting on the bench, no matter how big of a club that you're at. Sure, I'm sure he gets, plenty of work in training with Liverpool and all of that kind of thing, but obviously enough, that's completely and utterly different. And look, as I say, Bazunu, he's having it tough at Southampton. Be interesting to see with the new manager coming in what sort of effect that has. But in terms of his performances for Ireland, I know, look, he was probably questionable for one of the goals in his most recent performance, but outside of that, I mean, he's been outstanding, absolutely outstanding for Ireland over the last, however it is, nearly 2 years now since he's broke into it, I suppose. And look, Stephen will be sticking with him, and if Quinlan Kelleher has any ambitions of trying to break into the side or really challenging for that spot, yeah, he's got to get out on loan. But I think it's immaterial, because I don't think Liverpool are going to allow that to happen, and I can understand where they're coming from too,
Yeah, it's a tough position for him to be in. The 11 itself is fairly settled, like, looking over the last few games, even in terms of the players that are coming into it now, and we've mentioned a couple of them there, but who, in what positions maybe, and who do you think are the most likely to fill those positions? Do you think are the points that Stephen Kenny might be looking at, you know, in terms of some of those new players, or even the likes of Ogbene, who in a lot of ways has become was at some point the greatest next thing and has been slightly forgotten about over the last few windows?
Yeah, Ogbene is a big one for me. I think I would have him starting all day long.
Would you? Yeah.
To be honest with you, I would. I think he's excellent. And look, there's no doubt Obafemi has really caught the eye in terms of what he's done since he's come in. I think there's more consistency with Ogbene. Obafemi, ball comes to Obafemi, and you know, there's a 50% chance it could go brilliantly. There's a 50% chance it could go wrong. So there is. It would be my opinion with him. But with Ogbene, there's more consistency there. He's having a very good season again at club level. The big question is, and you know, it'll be interesting to see, is, you know, can you start the two of them? You know, Troy Parrott obviously is going to be out for these games. You know, could this be an opportunity that he looks to play the two of them beside each other again and see how they get on? Like, on paper, it looks frightening. I wouldn't fancy being a defender up against the two of them. So that certainly could be something that's very exciting. He's going to need a bit more. The other thing he's going to want, obviously, lads, is developing a bit more strength and depth in the middle of the field, because I think Knight, Malumbi, Cullen have pretty much nailed it. But what we saw the last day, unfortunately, was that it's a high tempo game that those three players are having to play. Stephen seemed very reluctant to allow his wing backs to come out and press the opposition fullbacks high up the field, which meant it was the two outside centre midfielders that were the ones expected to shuttle across, similar to Liverpool actually against Spurs last weekend. That's a high energy game and very, very tough for a guy to do that for more than 60 to 70 minutes. And ideally, you want a couple of players coming on around that 70-minute mark who continue to do that job really, really well for you, and that you've got a lot of trust and a lot of faith in. And I think he probably needs to delve into the squad to try and find the fellas who can perform those roles for him off the bench. You know.
Finally, Shane, we've got the small matter of the FAI Cup final at the Aviva Stadium on Sunday afternoon. It's an interesting one because, like, Derry are rightly so favourites in the bookies for this one, but I mean, Shelbourne, when you look at even the way they've gone about this season and a first season back in the Premier Division under Damien Duff, you look at their performance against Bohemians, the 3-0 win in the quarter-final in this competition, and I think they drew with Derry 1-1 just a couple of weeks ago in the league as well, albeit Sunday will have a different feel to it. But I mean, how do you see this one going? Because Derry, as I said, favourites, but Shelbourne will have a lot to say in this game.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd say on the chain is it's a brilliant cup final in that outside of Shamrock Rovers, these two clubs have probably been the biggest stories of the season, because you've had the injection of cash at Derry. You know, we've been crying out for somebody to make a burst back at Rovers and make it a bit more competitive again, and Derry are undoubtedly going to be that team over the next couple of years. Rory Higgins gone in and done a brilliant job with a team that's playing a lovely style of football. And then obviously you've got the whole Duffer narrative, and there's no doubt it's been brilliant for the league. It's been absolutely brilliant having Damien in the league. His profile, and then the fact that he is such an entertaining character, as well and good having profile, but Duffer's just, every time he opens his mouth, he seems to say something really interesting that people can latch onto. So in terms of creating a bit of hype and a bit of a good vibe around the cup final, I think this is a cracking one to have. And attendance tickets seem to be very, very strong. So it should be a really, really good day. How the game will go itself, Shelbourne are capable of making this game really, really awkward for Derry, no doubt about it. They have a very definitive style of play, and they've managed to nail it very, very well. And they'll just be awkward. They'll be not nice to play against. They work. Damien is very much reflected in that. And in Sean Boyd up top, they've got a guy who's an absolute handful for any team. There's a little bit of a question mark from what I'm hearing over Shane Farrell. That's a huge one for them. He would be in my League of Ireland Team of the Year, to be honest. I think he's been outstanding. And with Matty Smith already ruled out, because unfortunately he's on loan from one club to the other, with him ruled out already, they need Shane Farrell on the pitch. If Shane Farrell is on the pitch, he's capable of doing something out of nothing, and that's what Shells are going to need. If Shells are going to score here, it's either going to come from a set piece or it's going to come from something out of nothing, whereas Derry are more capable of grinding you down with intricate passing plays and fluid movements in the final third. But I do think Derry will come out on top. They're favourites for a reason. I do think they'll come out on top, but I don't think anybody would be surprised if Duffer managed to spring a shock here either,
One before we go, Shane, just Stephen McGuinness was the PFAI was in with Nathan last night, and he was talking about agents in the League of Ireland, the proliferation of them, and in a lot of cases the inexperience of them in the League of Ireland at the minute. As a manager and a coach around Irish football, what's your experience or thoughts about how players are being represented at that level at the minute?
Yeah, look, Adrian, there's a massive variety and disparity in what you're going to get, to be honest. Look, at the level that I'm at the moment, back then with Cove, most of the very few of the players would have agents, or there wouldn't be much interference on that side. But obviously, having been at Galway and Dundalk, there was far more going on in that front. And I just found, there was a couple of guys that I would have dealt with. I would have been involved in a lot of the contract stuff at Dundalk just when I landed up there. And there was some of the players had guys who were really good to deal with, really good to deal with. I'm thinking in particular, in relation to a deal with, Michael Duffy and things like this. There was actually, I remember one of the agents at the time was David Moyes' son, I think he could be Cameron Dunnigan's agent. And there was guys that were very professional, and while pitching for the best for their player, they were fair and they were reasonable in their aspirations. Whereas you get other guys who are just coming with completely and utterly unrealistic expectations and managing to convince their player that what they're asking for is realistic, and that it's a slight by the club if they're not willing to go and give them that sort of a figure. And it does them absolutely no favours whatsoever. So, look, huge disparity. There's a lot of good things in what the PFAI have done with this deal. There are a few question marks as well that I'd throw in relation to the deal that it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think it is going to be first year in. It's very much going to be a learning curve for everybody, FAI, PFAI and the clubs, because, Adrian, it's natural enough that the clubs are going to do everything they can to try and find ways and means, not so much around this, but to work with this, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You've pointed at something that we might come back and have a bit of a deeper chat about again with a bit more time. But for the minute, Shane, thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.
Fair play. Shane Keegan on the line there with thoughts on lots of different aspects of the football for you this morning. OTB AM brought to you by Gillette in association with Movember Effortless Shave Magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. It's gone 8:10. Good morning to you wherever it is you are at. We've so many comments coming into us about the different topics we've got our teeth into this morning. We've Isil Cody. Good morning to you, Isil, saying surely it's time we just forget provincial rugby for Munster and enter them in an international or a minimum international A contest only. Even at the Aviva last year, it's evident they're a big occasion team. That's a great shout.
Well, they've beaten Australia, they've beaten New Zealand, they've now beaten South Africa. So yeah, I agree.
There's stacking evidence for it there. Shifty lad, good morning to you. Shifty says the Chains picks of statues and shirts are in the 2 reds on Monday. He said, Shane, come on. Charlton, Giles, Willie John McBride and O'Driscoll is who Shifty is going for his 4 shouts, which is a good one. Rick Jagger is saying Johnny Sexton, undoubtedly Ireland's best ever rugby player. This is in terms of the statues. He says actually Sexton is undoubtedly one of the best rugby players ever.
Yeah, but Mount Rushmore is for dead presidents and the statues are for people of past.
I think so.
In
terms of their
Sexton hangs up the boots, then maybe he's in for a shout.
Holy Trinity says John Claffey of Bod, Rog and Paul O'Connell. Rog we haven't mentioned at all, and there's a couple of shouts from here, including the drop goal, obviously not at the Aviva but at the Cardiff Stadium, says Niall, best moment I've experienced at Lansdowne Road. He also says Gordon Hamilton try against Australia in 91.
Yeah. See, I don't disagree with any of these shouts, and even Shifty lads' picks there, Charlton, Giles, Willie John McBride and O'Driscoll.
Yeah.
It'd be ridiculous of me to disagree with any of those names. My point was that I was just going on the basis of great moments within that stadium that lit that stadium alive.
You're losing, Shane.
The statues going outside the stadium.
Your takes as well about the moment nature of them.
Yeah, well, listen. I mean, Shifty lad lost me at the shirts because the shirt's obviously fantastic. So.
An Irish international in rugby or soccer says Gav Sale on YouTube in Cork will be delicious, especially if the game isn't big enough to sell at the Aviva. That is another great shout, I have to say. That's cracker. Get some international sport on there.
Yeah, 100%. More of it the better.
Right,
sure.
it is 14 minutes past 8. It's Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. We've loads still to come. We'll be talking to Alan Quinlan in just a bit. A little bit more about that match last night, obviously, and the Fiji game to come over the weekend as well. A reminder as well that Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Each week we're giving you one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn coffee goodness at an Applegreen store near you. To enter that, you can just check out @Off the Ball on Twitter. You can like and retweet our Braeburn competition post there, and you'll be in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromises on quality or taste to give you the best on-the-go coffee experience on the road, and it's available at an Applegreen near you today. We're back after the break. Martin Lipton is going to talk to us about some reaction to the Gareth Southgate squad for the World Cup.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Koigig Pod on OTB Sports.
Production of a Women's Nations League. We have followed the path of the man card. I can see your face already.
I think all the concerns that we have, obviously being that middle tier, are very valid, considering just how much we benefited from playing teams of a higher calibre going into our qualifiers.
Keep up to date with all the WSL action every Tuesday and subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now. OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo.
Alright, it's 8:15. You're watching OTB AM. Football writer Martin Lipton is on the line. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
Good to speak with you again. Thanks a million for taking the call. We wanted to chat to you obviously after the squad announcement yesterday, which we'll talk to you about in a bit, but in so much as you can possibly speak on behalf of an entire nation, is there an expectation, just in relation to the conversation that's happening around the off-the-field stuff in relation to Qatar and its human rights record, is there an expectation that on the England squad, because obviously Gareth Southgate addressed it fairly fulsomely yesterday, an expectation that they'll speak about Qatar while they're there, or do most just subscribe to the shut up and play FIFA approach?
I think that they'll be asked. I'm not covering England, so it's not down to me, but I'm sure those who are will, particularly the senior players. I think it'd be unfair to throw that on the ones who are fairly young, actually, but the senior players will be asked their opinions. I suspect quite a few of them will be very happy to give their opinions, actually. Harry Kane has already spoken and others will. Jordan Henderson, unquestionably. So Marcus Rashford, he's very willing to say what he thinks. I don't think there'll be a lack of voices from the England camp, particularly in the build-up. I think once the tournament starts, that'll be a bit different. The view will be, look, what else can we say? Our views are pretty clear. Mm-hmm. But I think they will be asked, particularly when they're in the first 2 days, on the Wednesday and Thursday, at those press conferences that are held in Doha.
Yeah, we've all been trying to make sense of this thing. Particularly, I think it's focused minds over the last 3 or 4 months of, are we allowed to enjoy the football? On what level should we continue to shine a light, obviously, from our side on the media point of view, into what's actually happening in that country? Even so much yesterday, the Republic of Ireland manager Stephen Kenny is doing his own press conference about a couple of upcoming friendlies and been quizzed about whether, why should he go to Qatar, essentially. So we're all trying to sort of make that bit of sense of it. What's your, as we now on the eve of the World Cup, Martin, what's your view on that, trying to strike that balance of, I guess, being able to enjoy the football on some level and being aware of everything else that's going on?
Well, the answer to that, I guess, is the World Cup is starting on Sunday, the 20th of November, and it's the biggest sporting spectacle in the world, and millions of people will be watching it, and million or so people will be going to see it, and I'm one of those who are going to cover it. So the event is the event, but at the same time, it would be remiss not to take note, recognise, talk about where this tournament is taking place. This is a country that's been built out of the desert in 40 years. There was nothing there, it's truly bizarre. You see a photo from the late 70s, early 80s. There's one hotel just surrounded by sand. Now you can't see that hotel because there's so many other bigger hotels dwarfing it. It's truly remarkable. But that has been built on the backs of migrant labourers, a country where only 1/7 of the population are native people. There's 300,000 Qataris and a population of 2.1 million. A nation where homosexuality is banned, where misogyny seems to be pretty much ingrained, not totally, but certainly to a degree. You can't ignore these facts. At the same time, it's a football tournament.
Yeah, David Squire's piece in The Guardian this week was a thing of beauty. It was a very different piece from him for people who are familiar with his drawings in The Guardian. It was a true story about a migrant worker, a hotel worker, and their experience of how poorly treated they've been. Is it part of your responsibility, Martin, or your brief almost going out there to cover that other side, or what will your approach be when you're out there?
We've got 2 news reporters going. I suspect that they will be involved in, as we have done up to now, in those things. I mean, I have a particular role within the sporting coverage. I've been to Cathal a couple of times. I'm not a huge fan, but it doesn't matter what I think about the country. It's where it's taking place. I've long covered the scandal of Qatar winning the right to host the tournament. I've written ever since that date in late 2010, I said the scandal with 2018 wasn't Russia winning, it was England getting 2 votes. The scandal with 2022 was Qatar winning. My position has never changed. But at some point, I have to be realistic about it. I'm there to cover a football tournament as well.
I obviously watching the match last night, I suspect that even the England following non-Manchester United fans who were watching last night were suddenly dialed into the fact that here was a striker full of confidence, looking like an absolute world beater. Probably never been looks as if he'd never been playing with as much confidence as he was last night with Marcus Rashford. Must fill England fans with a lot of hope.
Well, it certainly pleased Gareth Southgate hugely. I don't think Rashford starts, but I do think he'll be involved. No, I think he'll go with the front three of Foden, Sterling, and Kane.
Right.
That's what I mean. I personally want Saka to play, but that's not my choice. But I think that having a fit, flying Rashford does make a big difference in terms of his options off the bench. And were there to be an injury, or were he to come on and score a couple of goals in the early matches and make a case to start, then clearly he'd be in fine form.
Some of the criticism, I guess, Martin, of Southgate's pick, and look, he's in a lose-lose situation here because no matter who he leaves out, there's going to be a little bit of controversy from some quarters. But this argument that he picks on form, you look at Calvin Phillips in the team, you look at Harry Maguire in the squad as well. Granted, Callum Wilson over Tomori is based fairly heavily on form, but do you buy that? Because he talks all the time about picking on form, and yet you see players like Harry Maguire and Phillips who just haven't been there at club level in recent weeks.
I think it's easier for him to justify the Phillips selection because there isn't anybody else who works as a holding midfielder. Maguire, it's because he trusts him. He's never let him down. He's a very loyal manager. There's no doubt about that. And Maguire has never played poorly, really, apart from one game. That's in 50 caps for England. So it's hard to be critical. In the Euros 18 months ago, he had a pretty average at best season, was under fire. Missed the first game or so because of injury. But when he came in, he was excellent and scored goals. And I think that's the thing with Maguire. He seems to be more relaxed playing for England than he does playing for Manchester United.
Defensively, I look at the squad and I'm thinking of the left side, and granted Ben Chilwell out of the squad with injury. But if you see Luke Shaw as potentially the only left wing back in that squad now, like Saka played there, I know, in September against Italy. He wasn't good that night in that position. Kieran Trippier is an option maybe there, but he's probably going to be on the right hand flank. If there's an injury to Luke Shaw, for example, it could be quite troublesome on that side.
Yeah, I mean, I think Saka probably is more likely than Trippier, because I think you're right that Trippier may well start. I mean, it is a coin toss. He might go with Alexander-Arnold thinking he can play him into form, and then Trippier becomes an option on the left more. Yes, the vulnerabilities are there with it, but again, the only other option left back, Mitchell at Crystal Palace, maybe. There weren't too many, and he's played one game. It is hard to it's easy to criticise. It's harder to come up with alternative solutions, I think.
Was there anybody who was the top of your list, Martin, of people that you thought, wow, he was unlucky to miss out?
I tossed between Tomori and Tony, actually. I would have liked both of them in, but I can see why he's gone with the men he has got. The one I think that everyone will be surprised about was Gallagher's selection, because his last game was in June against Hungary and he was pretty awful. He hasn't had a brilliant season, but he's got legs, and I think that's given him the nod over Ward-Prowse, who's possibly quite unlucky not to make it.
Yeah, and Maddison obviously has got a lot of the headlines as well, and it's funny how when these squads get named and there's so much focus on one player who might end up seeing very little game time potentially once they get to the World Cup. What's your view on Maddison? Because I think the hope is obviously maybe that he might bring a bit of an extra edge maybe to that England attack. Do you see him getting much game time?
It all depends on how he behaves over the next 8 days, I suspect. That it's clearly been an issue, whatever Gareth says about Maddison's temperament, personality, etc., about the sort of lad he is. You know, they've adopted that All Black philosophy of no dickheads, haven't they? And I think it's fair to say that one or two might consider putting Maddison in that bracket, and therein lies the issue. As a footballer, I've absolutely no doubt. I think he's an outstandingly talented player. He gives you a dead ball threat. He can pass the ball. He can take set pieces. I think he thoroughly deserves selection on his abilities on the pitch. The reason he hasn't been around has been James Maddison.
He certainly deepens those attacking options, Martin. And like there was the incident at the casino, and he was pictured, you know, and the England team were playing, and as you said, that there are incidents like that cause you to question his. I guess his.
But also, that was 3 years ago. Maybe people grow up.
Yeah.
Southgate also said it wasn't an issue for him. He said.
Well, he has to say that, doesn't he?
Well, he said he also. Interesting.
People don't always tell the truth. Even George Washington lied occasionally.
It's a fair point, but I also could buy it, is the thing, because like ultimately, what difference does it make if he wasn't in the squad? So be it.
Well, yeah, I think if other factors had been, he wouldn't have been there. But the fact is, you know, it was a 26-man squad. And maybe he does feel he just needs a bit more angel dust in it, magic dust in the squad. Someone who can actually break a game open with a pass, if the others aren't working. But you know, he's got to get into the team or into the involvement ahead of Mounts and Fodens and Sterlings and Grealish and Saka. There's quite a lot of talent as an attacking force, particularly if you assume there's going to be the two central midfielders. They're likely to be Bellingham and Rice to start in a 3-4-3.
It's funny, Martin, like Southgate gave his reasoning for not including Reece James as too much of a gamble with the injury, which is totally understandable and fair. And yet you look at Kyle Walker being picked and Calvin Phillips being picked, who are both struggling with their own injury complaints as well. So, like, is that hypocrisy in some ways? Like, you're not picking Reece James because of those gambling issues in terms of gambling on his injury, but then again, you're going with the likes of Walker and Phillips, who are also struggling.
Well, at least Phillips is now playing because he played for City in midweek.
Yeah.
His argument was simple, really, that, you know, James wouldn't be fit for any of the group phase, and they think that Walker will. So he wanted him to have played in the group phase rather than coming straight from injury into potentially being available for the knockout phase. You may think it's a bit harsh, but you could only take two. I think 2 is the maximum number of risks you can take in a squad, even in a squad of 26. I mean, in 23, I wouldn't take any risks personally. In a 26, you can take 2. He got away with 2 last time because both Henderson and Maguire came in with knocks, and he needed the 26 in the end because obviously Chilwell got injured and COVIDed, and Mount had issues, and then Foden missed the final because of injury. So you need a deep squad in that regard. What
would, again, I know you're not picking the team, Martin, but what would your back 4 be, out of curiosity?
Well, he's going to pick a back 5, so it doesn't matter.
Back 5, sorry, yeah. What's your centre half? Like, what's your centre half selection?
Is Harry Maguire starting as well? Shane is asking.
I think he'll go for the first game. I think he'll go Dyer, Stones, Maguire.
And nobody should be like. I was watching some of the reaction yesterday about Harry Maguire being included. I mean, this is not a great shock to anybody who's been following English football.
No, I mean, the surprise would have been if he wasn't in the squad, not if he wasn't in the squad.
I've seen it suggested, Martin, by a couple of journalists online that it's England's best squad on paper since 2006, and look, on paper doesn't matter a jot. But would you go along with that?
Let's just see. I think in terms of quality of attacking players, yes, and depth of attacking players. Even if we've only got one proven international goal scorer, but he's not bad. 50 goals in 70 odd games. And And we saw in the Euros, Sterling and Grealish, particularly Foden as well, Mount played well. So, yeah, I think you can see that argument. I think defensively, it's harder to make that claim.
Yeah.
If you look at the teams that England, even in 2014 when they weren't great, Jagielka and the boy who was at Chelsea, who was at Bolton before, I can't remember his name now, but they were decent centre halves and in decent form, and he made the big decision, Roy, in 14 to leave out Ashley Cole to play to send Luke Shaw as a second left back behind Leighton Baines. Maybe that was a mistake looking back. I still think if you look at that 2002-2006 defence, when you had in 2006 they had the options of Campbell, who was sort of first reserve behind Terry and Ferdinand. In 2002, Southgate himself was first reserve in the squad behind Campbell and Ferdinand. I mean, they were stronger then than now, I think.
I was chatting to Neville Southall in Dublin last week, and he was quietly confident about the Wales-England game in the last group game. And you even look at the United States squad in the end this week, and probably stronger than some people give them credit for, and they'll want a reasonable tournament. Do you see any way in which England don't even get out of the group?
Well, anything's possible. Yeah. But I think England win the group relatively comfortably, personally. Okay. But this is a hostage to fortune when they lose 3-0 to Iran. But no, I don't think they'll particularly shine. But you don't have to shine. You have to get through, and then it becomes interesting. I think it's a possibility that England may be if they win the first two, they might play a shadow team against Wales, because it won't matter, because they could have won the group by then, and that would be perfect for Wales as well, I suspect. I'm not sure Wales do get through. I think that USA or Iran, in fact, both of them could end up finishing above Wales, but we will see.
I couldn't help but laugh watching the Carabao Cup fourth round draw last night after the United Villa game at Old Trafford, and it only strikes you when they talk about the dates and the World Cup final being on the Sunday, and then these Carabao Cup fourth round ties being on the Tuesday and the Wednesday. Like, I mean, you have Man City Liverpool as one of those games as well. This is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a reserve team game, won't it? As simple as that. I mean, the other thing I would say is that only 4 teams are playing the last weekend of the World Cup out of the 32. So, and a lot of them will be out the previous weekend because of the quarters. Yeah. So, in fact, they will all be out the previous weekend, because once you get the 2 teams of the semis are the 2 teams of the final weekend. So they'll actually have been home for 10 days, a lot of the players.
Yeah. City, they'll be Trent Alexander-Arnold and Foden, Henderson. They'll all be well rested, Martin, is what you're saying. They'll have had a few weeks with their feet up. That's what you're getting at?
Are you suggesting they're out in the group phase?
Would never say something like that. We'll.
They might be. You never know. I mean, they have been in the past. But it all depends. The one thing that's absolutely critical for England is Kane to be fit and firing, because if he is, that gives them a goal a game, doesn't it?
And Conte saying that he's what did he say during the week, that he was pretty tired looking, and he was
wonder why the haze.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and to be fair, it's not unique in that regard. I think everybody who goes there is going to be in the same boat. At least that might be the one positive. We'll see how it pans out, as you say, over the next while. Martin Lipton of The Sun, thanks a million.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Loads of comments coming into us. Ward Prowse deserved a spot, says Spectre Core. Yeah, Ward Prowse for a set piece alone, says Bracken. Lack of centre-back options to be... also a lack of options to centre-back to be critical of Maguire's selection when you look at what he's done for England in past tournaments. He's definitely trading a past glory. It's whether he can re-deliver that once the World Cup kicks off. And, he's also this centre of fun for people, I think.
Sounds good.
Maguire.
Sorry, of course he is. I
think that's a big part. We sneer at Harry Maguire in this country. I think that's a big part of what informs our thought process around his selection or otherwise. He's also not great. It's the other side to it. It's part of that's based in reality.
He's better for England, that's the thing. He could end up being brilliant for them at the World Cup. I mean, which sounds a ridiculous thing to say, but he just has been not involved for United. But he's a man of confidence. He could walk into that team at the World Cup and just be their best player.
He could be. I don't see it. He could be.
I just confidence. You get the Iran game first off and he has a good game. All of a sudden he's flying it. He's ready to go.
I just think his confidence is a wafer thin.
It is, yeah. And you need to do
possible to fall apart at any given moment. Shane will be my view on Harry Maguire as I sneer at him. So I appreciate that. That's I'm one of those. Keegan says, just in relation to the conversation we were having with Martin there at the top of that piece in relation to where it's being hosted, he says, if you're aware, you can't enjoy. Same with Live Golf, but also the same with most businesses. FIFA went for the money. A lot of Irish people have better salaries, etc., etc. And look, I think that's an important point to touch on. FIFA turned down, I'm sure people saw this week, turned down a request by Denmark to wear the T-shirts with Human Rights for All written on them. Think about that for a second. They turned down a request for a team to wear a T-shirt with Human Rights for All written on it. Stop and think about that for a second and the madness of it. FIFA just say, shut up and play. Aside from the fact that I think Denmark were foolish on one hand, maybe to have asked permission. On the other hand, maybe they've forced FIFA now into giving a rejection of that and have shined the ultimate spotlight on them. But who are the teams that are going to show some balls now? And who are the players that Martin talked about, Harry Kane and these players that have spoken up before? Who are the players that are going to make that next move from Denmark once they land on Qatar soil? That's where the heat gets turned up in every regard. Or who are going to be the next move, like from the Aussies with their video a couple of weeks back, or the band of the 9 European brothers and their One Love armbands? Is it just a case of shut up and play once you get there? FIFA have contacted teams to say, please let us now focus on football. Shut up and play. Do play, but please don't shut up. Now's the time to speak up, speak out. Don't take comfort, please, from Jurgen Klopp telling you that it's not your fault the World Cup is in a country void of the most basic human rights. Of course it's not your fault. Nobody said it was. Nobody would insinuate that it was. But don't spend the rest of your life thinking that you should have said something, that you should have done something. Don't just shut up and play. Don't wait for the circus to pack up tent and shift off before you reveal the inner turmoil that you were going through about playing the World Cup tournament in Qatar. Don't wait. To borrow a phrase, just do it. So that's our thoughts on what's going to happen over the next few weeks. And it's a conflict, of course it is, and it's hard to know exactly which is the right side to sit on in relation to all of that. We've loads of comments coming into us, whether it's about that or it's about the loads of stuff about playing more sport at Páirc Uí Chaoimh, more international sport potentially, and about our picks as well, Shane, for outside the Aviva Stadium of our four Maguires. Back 3 or 5 might suit Maguire, less space so his pace isn't found out, says John Claffey, and that's a real quality analysis of the point. Like, it's not poking fun at stuff. It's like, actually, he needs a bit of support now given his age profile.
100%, and he does need support. And someone else in the comments pointing out, and you forget this as well, you kind of have to look at the track the teams are going to take. Senegal is a likely last 16 tie for England. France then, and possibly Germany or Spain.
Yeah,
they're not going to go deep in this tournament. I mean, the French are going to beat them in the quarters if it gets to that stage. Senegal without Mane is a team that might not even make the last 16, to be honest, without Sadio Mane. But I just think, look, he is a figure of ridicule, Harry Maguire, of course, and like, people think that he's slagged off for bullying. It's not about that at all. I actually think, like, the Harry Maguire that predated last season's Harry Maguire, who was brutal at United, was actually alright. Like, you remember Harry Maguire at Leicester and Sheffield United and early stages at Manchester United, and you think, good player, not an £80 million centre half by any stretch, but a decent player and very good at international level for England. So yeah, I think he'll be shepherded a little bit in a back five. I think England will struggle massively. I've called it a number of times, Adrian. Denmark are going to go deep.
Wow. Very,
very deep into this tournament. Potentially win it.
Whoa, jeez, you just escalated quickly.
I know, yeah. I actually think Brazil are going to win the tournament, but Denmark are my hashtag dark horses.
Right. 8:37, you're watching OTB AM, and we are live with you every weekday morning with Gillette in association with Movember at the minute. That's Effortless Shave, Magnificent Mo, obviously all relating to the activity this month. You can donate now and check out more details. Just head along to Movember.com. I do want to remind you as well that tomorrow, St Mary's in Meath, the Gaelic Football Club, have members proposing to kick a point in all 32 GAA county grounds with the permission of each county and the GAA. 16 St Mary's teams are going to travel and hashtag kick a point for Shamey in 2 neighbouring counties. The fundraiser is in aid of Seamus Brady, who's a lifelong member of St Mary's in Meath, and it was in his capacity as a hard-working volunteer that Shamey fell from the roof at St Mary's Clubhouse in September of 2015. The club reaching out now to the GAA community and the wider community to support Shamey in his hour of need. There's a GoFundMe page set up and we're going to Rather than give you the long, complicated address to get to that, we'll tweet it out so you can check out the Off the Ball handle and you can head along to the GoFundMe page to get involved with that. And as I said, it is all in aid of hashtag Kick a Point for Shamey. So check out more details there. And Cathal is in studio with us, Cathal. So I presume is that my indicator for... You're going to tell us what's happening in the world of live sport?
Yes. Yes.
Help me out here.
Here.
Well, last night Munster securing a famous win over South Africa, 28 points to 14. It finished in Porky. Munster scored 4 tries. Ireland then concluding their preparations today for tomorrow's test against Fiji. The draw for the Carabao Cup 4th round took place last night. Manchester City and Liverpool is the big tie in the last 16. Manchester United through after a 4-2 win over Aston Villa last night. They'll play Burnley next. Newcastle set to face Bournemouth. In the other games, Wolves set to take on Gillingham. Southampton will face Lincoln City and Brighton go to Charlton. MK Dons meet Leicester, while Blackburn welcome Nottingham Forest to Ewood Park. Those games will take place the week beginning the 19th of December, which of course is the week straight after the World Cup final. Tonight, the final place in next season's SSE Electricity League Premier Division is up for grabs. UCD take on Waterford at Richmond Park in Inchicore. Kick-off there at 7:45. Porrick Harrington going well at the Charles Schwab Cup Championship on the Champions Tour. He's one shot off the lead after the opening round. He shot a 5 under 66 last night in Arizona. He still has a chance to win the Charles Schwab Cup, which is the order of merit on the Champions Tour, but he needs to win this week. And Stephen Alker, who actually leads the standings, is also in a share of the lead at that tournament on 6 under par. And then on the LPGA Tour, the Pelican Women's Championship gets underway in Florida today. Was suspended or cancelled yesterday play due to poor weather. It's been reduced to 54 holes, and Leona Maguire and Stephanie Meadow both in the field there. And finally there's racing at Dundalk, where the first goes to post at 4:45 this evening.
Going to throw you straight onto the bus here, Cathal. Statues outside the Aviva Stadium. 4 statues you get to pick, right? Who's on them?
Outside the Aviva?
Yeah, I suppose it's a split between football and rugby is what we're generally thinking
John
about.
Aldridge was saying during the week that I'll buy you a couple of seconds to have a think about it there, Carl. That Jack Charlton should have his own statue given what he's done. He was like, it's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah.
So it just got us thinking, who would be the 4?
Brian O'Driscoll.
Fair.
John Giles.
Fair.
Although would John Giles have played most of his football for Ireland at Dalymount?
I think there's an element to this. I certainly looked at it like it wasn't that important what they achieved actually in that ground.
Yeah.
I mean, they will have achieved something at the, but
yeah.
I think in the grand scheme of things, Giles qualifies is what I'm saying.
Okay, so John Giles, O'Driscoll. I would say Jack Charlton. Roy Keane.
Going 3-1 split.
You let yourself down there at the end.
See, I went for the moment.
Went 2-2, did you?
No, I went for McAteer's goal against the Dutch. I went for Stockdale against the All Blacks.
People have been rightly shooting him down for picking moments that
get abuse.
In 100, they're making the valid point, called that in 100 years' time. Like it was Shane Long was possibly the greatest moment of sport that I've ever been at. It was just unbridled joy.
Yeah.
But in 100 years' time,
well, if that's the argument, it is Jack, Paul McGrath, Bod, and Paul O'Connell probably. If that's the way we're looking at it.
Robbie Keane, like,
does he go ahead of Charlton or McGrath?
Well, I have him, and
he's still working for the FA, so that means
I
you
have
can't have
Paul
him.
McGrath as my first. He's not working for the FA.
No, sorry, he's not. But it's more recent.
We think
statues wise, as I said, it's got to be people a bit further back, and in maybe 30-40 years, Robbie gets a statue when it's all kind of when he's an old grey man and he cuts the tape himself.
He's not far off.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm trying to think of other rugby figures that could feature. Paul O'Connell, Sexton.
Jack Kyle and Brian
Jack Kyle, yeah. Kieran Fitzgerald. I don't know if the players
the Connacht shouts are coming out now. It's like everybody gets parochial about these things. What Sligo person can we possibly? I don't know if there's any case for any Sligo person.
Kieran Kelly, the goalkeeper, saved all those penalties in the FAI Cup final.
Is it moments? Yeah. I was thinking about him.
There you go.
Too quick, Shane. That was a bit far too quick.
It's an interesting one, yeah. Are there any statues? There are no statues outside the Aviva at the moment. No.
Because then you walk outside Old Trafford and you see the Trinity statue of Best Lord Charlton.
There's loads of lovely little spots around the Aviva. We're talking about 4. I mean, it'd be not a bad start, but there's some lovely little spops around Lansdowne Road that you could.
And they do add stuff in terms of a visitor attraction coming to a stadium.
Does Croke Park have any? It doesn't have any statues.
Yeah, it has.
They've got Michael Cusack have their.
Cusack at the front, just outside the museum there. Yeah.
There probably could be scope for more there as well.
What for? Go
Again,
Central
oh
Park.
God.
Here we go.
Here we go.
That's even more controversial.
Eamon O'Hara.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean.
Of course. That's a 2-2 split between hurling and Gaelic football. That's an obvious one.
That's one we're gonna next Friday. We'll lock that in. We'll keep doing these at different grounds from around the country before we get to the next one. Right, Carl, good man. Thanks for that. I think we're going to go to the sports pages.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be. No, I'm not having that. No.
It's 9:15, and I always think that sting sort of sets us in a bit of a kick back and relax sort
weekend
of
kind of vibe. Like the shirt. It goes well with the shirt, the flowy shirt.
Nothing goes well with that shirt, Jen. Let's call it as it is. As John Harrison would say, just tell it like it is.
I have a thick skin, I can take it.
Johnny Sexton, the first Irish rugby captain to win a series in New Zealand, deserves a statue, and I do think that Sexton is definitely one of those that down the track could be in for a shout, but
down the track.
You've introduced a good criteria, which I think is if you're currently playing,
you're just not
up
there
for consideration just
exactly.
yet.
Yeah, 100%. Bod is there for sure.
Earl should get a statue in Moy Ross. Normally rugby players don't come from working class backgrounds, says Celtic on YouTube as well. I think if you were doing Thomond Park, we are going around the country with this, by the way. This is definitely
of course.
Now. We can
Jimmy McGee would get a statue for me. Like,
would he?
Do you know, just his voice is iconic.
Yeah.
I actually saw him at the Aviva Stadium a couple of weeks before he passed away, and he was there to watch Ireland play. Was it Northern Ireland that night? I can't remember who they were playing, but just you just thought that man's voice, and George Hamilton as well. I mean, of course they didn't play there, but their voices are so in sync with some of the great moments.
With some of the great moments. It's absolutely true. Right, the sports pages at 8:45 this morning. Good morning to you if you've only just joined us. This is the Irish Times for you. Crowley ready for debut after graduating from his WizKid days. This is obviously in relation to the Fiji game, and he's on the bench for that and looks as if he'll come in for it. Ireland A performance prevented Farrell from tinkering further. It's certainly an interesting talking point about the lack of hands that went up from that game, as much as anything else that we'll talk to Alan Quinlan about in just a few moments' time. That's the Irish Times this morning. The Daily Mail on the back page. I'm doing my job, Kenny explains why he'll be going to Qatar. This is obviously picking up at the conversation we've been having with Martin Lipton and ourselves over the course of the morning. He is going to Qatar and says basically, what difference can one person not going make? Glory will get the most out of Dublin. No.
Glory will get the most out of
that one again. Gilroy will get the most out of Dublin players, as Craig Diaz has been doing the rounds of interviews yesterday, and Philip Lanigan writing here about that, and that he was as impressive. Craig Gilroy had a very fleeting Dublin career, and actually when you're looking at the Crokes games recently, you're like, Jesus, how is this guy not involved in the Dublin team now? And there is a bit of a, I wouldn't say a clamour, but certainly calls for it at the minute. But the chatter this week has not been confirmed yet that Pat Gilroy is going to get back involved, and Diaz has certainly given him the rubber stamp of approval from a tactical and maybe mainly from an organisational point of view. Yeah,
you bring him in. I was surprised that I didn't see Pat Gilroy as someone who was an understudy or a backroom man. I saw him as a forefront man, but
they're all at it now.
They're all at it, and I don't believe GA rumours anymore, because Jason Sherlock to Monaghan was the rumour that just didn't happen.
But it doesn't mean there wasn't anything in it.
No, nothing in it. But similarly would Pat Gilroy want to do this? Possibly.
I'd say he would.
Yeah, potentially.
Unfinished business.
Gets on well with Desi Farrell. It would be quite an acquisition to a backroom team. Let's just say that. Because you're probably looking at other backroom teams around the country now. The Mayo one being particularly strong, and now you're seeing the likes of even Aidan O'Rourke in the backroom of Donegal. Backroom teams are so important now.
Yeah.
And Pat Gilroy would be a huge acquisition if they got him.
Park Life is the photograph there after Munster's double score win over South Africa at the Park last night. Needless to say, dominates the front page of the Irish Examiner this morning as well. Lark in the Park is definitely a headline that I can get behind there. Munster complete triple crown of wins over Southern Hemisphere's best. Which is a good observation there from the Irish Examiner. The Irish Independent, Kenny Qatar boycott by me would achieve nothing. Ireland boss will travel to World Cup to see 8 matches in 5 days for football reasons. He's obviously on a scouting mission ahead of our own upcoming qualifiers. Munster hit the box with a game. Brilliant Reds take flight to record another famous win. This is Simon Zebo going over in the corner. That's just the end of the cheeky glance that he gave across to the retreating and ultimately flailing South African defence. He went over for his try last night. And you have to earn your spot in an Irish Test team, says Farrell. That's in the back page of the Irish Independent for you this morning. Quick look what's happening across the water. The Guardian, Southgate opts for playmaker Madison to fire Qatar dreams, and England's T20 World Cup final to be shown on Channel 4. That's interesting.
Ruining our hope. Like, we beat the English in the T20 World Cup, and then they go on and get to the final regardless.
Well, it'd be better for us, I think, if they went on and win it.
True. We were all hoping for the India-Pakistan final. It just didn't happen. But the England will go very close this weekend. You'd imagine it'll be a good final.
Also then we have the Sun spring picking. Kenny feels that loan deal could be Evan for ace. There's so many puns going on here, it's hard to keep up with them. Uncapped kid Ferguson offers different threat. It will be interesting to see. Do you think he gets game time?
I mean, there's 2 friendlies. I think he probably gets thrown in at some point. Maybe the Malta game,
like give him last 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, get him a cap. And Kenny wants to blood players. It looks good for a manager when you blood X amount of players into the team.
Oh yeah, you can sit down at the board at some point.
And friendlies have the opportunity to do that. So I'd love to see him in the team for sure.
Bruno Sparks, stunning response. This is Manchester United last night. 4 blimey.
I'll tell you what, Bruno Fernandes, I'd say if you're an opposition player or fan, you would absolutely hate him. He's
because he's playing the hole, or he's a good player?
No, he riles people up. Like there was one moment where he ran into one of the Villa defenders and kind of took a dive. Like couple of moments towards the end where there was Villa players, Leon Bailey I think it was, kicked out at Lisandro Martinez, a bit ridiculous, and a few words back and forth. But Bruno, I'd say, is the king of shithousery, winding people up left, right and centre. Like United fans do like him, and he hasn't probably reached the potential that he did in his first season at the club, but I'd say he's a nightmare to play against.
Better without Ronaldo is the cliche that's ultimately true, I think, at this stage. Horgan catching O'Gara's crossfield kick when we hammered England in 2007. I was in the corner. It's a spectre core there. Lads on the statues debate, says Alan Mooney. Good morning to you, Alan. Willie John McBride winning Lions captain, legend. Definitely a case for Willie John McBride.
Yeah. Was the Horgan one in Croker or Lansdowne? I can't remember now. The catch in the corner,
2007.
Where was it? Cameron knows. Croker, yeah. So it doesn't really count if it was Croker. Like, it's still a great moment in Irish rugby, but
yeah. And Spectre's back on to pull us up on that as well. Righto, it is 10-9. It's OTB AM. We're brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember Effortless Shave Magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
How are you getting on?
I'm good.
You up a bit hoarse? Yeah.
Did you? A bit hoarse. I was.
Did you trouble getting out of the ground? You were out? Go on.
I was cleaning out the hen house there again. So I'm down at my mum's here, so I was rushing in to get on. But anyway, I'm here now.
Were you actually cleaning out the hen house?
Correct, I was.
Man. I was surprised to hear that for the reason for being hoarse after events last night. It sounded like an unbelievable atmosphere down there.
Yeah, it was really special. I think obviously the performance then kind of added to the whole occasion. There was a little bit of nervousness when you meet people going in, but what would the performance like? Would we be in trouble against a very powerful South African side with 14 Springboks in their 23? A lot of those players that played last night for South Africa were have been very good in the URC. We've seen them performing really well, and so yeah, I was a little bit nervous beforehand, but everybody was excited by it. And of course, you'll meet a few die-hard Munster fans who say, "No, we'll rise to the occasion. It'll be great tonight. We'll get a win." And I just thought it was it was really special. Anybody who was there will talk about this for a long time again.
Is it too easy to start talking about like playing more games at Páirc Uí Chaoimh off the back of last night, given everything that happened, the magnitude of it? Or conversely, I think Munster netted, I don't know, was it 150 grand out of it last night? They might get more, interestingly, if it was like a Heineken Cup game or something down the track. Do you think, despite all the work that's gone on to separate Cork and Limerick, that maybe they should look at going back down the track?
Look, I think the only way it'll happen is if there's knockout stages of URC or Europe in particular. I think what's more pressing for the current Munster group is getting performances and getting consistency, and trying to get league points and climb up the table a little bit. So it was a special night for Cork, and a lot of people are kind of talking about this Cork-Limerick divide. And look, you know yourself and Adrian in sport, when when results aren't going well for any sporting team at any level, there's always little things crop up and side arguments for certain ways things can be done better. Cork people deserved that last night. It was very special for them. You know, there is a lot of talk about Limerick and the High Performance Centre being in Limerick, and I'm sure people in Cork would prefer if it was the other way around. I'm a Tip man. I prefer if it was in Tipperary. And, you know, it's a debate that went on for a long time. You know, when Moss beat us in 2004, there was probably 8-10 players sat down with the management to try and go through where we can get better, why did we come up short again, you know, in that semi-final. And one of the big talking points was one centre, either in Cork or Limerick or outside either county as well. So
has it almost come full circle, Quinny, from that absolutely valid point that you make, the tension that was between the two areas at that point, and players been based in different places? Everybody accepts now Limerick is the home, but has it almost come full circle to the point that they could go back to Cork now that it's moved on enough?
Well, look, the High Performance Centre is in Limerick, whether people like that or not, that's where it is. But I think certainly sharing the games a little bit more, you know, there's Musgrave Park had the Zebra game this year, the warm-up games, and it is difficult at times for people to go either way. I think probably with the road between Cork and Limerick, it's tricky. It's a good hour and a half, a good hour and 40 minutes, sometimes 2 hours if people are coming from West Cork. So it's a big county. So yeah, maybe they can share the games a little bit more. But obviously, if you have big games and European games, it's difficult to bring them to Musgrave because of the capacity. And you know, maybe Páirc Uí Chaoimh will be an option going forward, and I think it'll maybe appease everybody. I think, you know, the whole occasion last night was really special, but that's up to the GA as well. And you're going down a different road there, kind of having regular games there. I think it was a one-off game last night. It was very successful. The parking and traffic situation was chaotic, but you know, the stadium was wonderful and it was a great atmosphere. So I just think it'll come into play for if they get into knockout stages and have to have a bigger capacity. And just look back at Toulouse, the Toulouse game in May, where it had to be moved to Dublin. That was over the Ed Sheeran concert, but for semi-finals you have to have a certain capacity and nominate a stadium in your home country. It's not a home advantage now anymore, so it certainly could happen again, and I'm sure it'd be a success again if it did happen.
As a tip man, as you said, Quinny, must have been quite a special moment to see Cashel's own Diarmuid Barron cross the line for a try in a game of that magnitude.
Yeah, well, as a tip man, Shane, I'm going to say this: Semple Stadium next for a Munster game. I'm pushing hard for that. Yeah, Diarmuid Barron was excellent. It was brilliant to see him score. But just in general, all the players, they were up against very, very big players, physical players, aggressive players, and they had to play with a pace and a tempo last night, and their skill execution was really good. I think someone like Mike Prendergast now would be really, really pleased. The camera went to him a few times and you could see his reaction, because he's probably seen a bit of this in training since the start of the season. It's broken down in a lot of games, and I think to have that ability to play with a bit more ambition and shape and get the attack better off phase play and players working hard to get into position. You know, Shane Daly was brilliant coming in off the wing last night, handling ball in midfield, giving little passes, and there was a couple of occasions where they could have scored another couple of tries. So I think...
Quinny, can I just ask, sorry to interrupt, can I just ask you about that point, just about the freedom that they were playing with? Do you think that relates, because Paddy Patterson afterwards, amongst other things, was talking about that element of the shot to nothing aspect, and the pressure was off. So just on that, was that a function of the one-off nature of the game last night and ultimately not having a knock on bigger, more important things? Or is it, like Jack O'Donoghue was talking about afterwards, the end of block one of games, the end of block one of training, the bedding in of the plan? Because I think that's the thing that Munster fans are keen to know this morning. Is it a portent of better things to come, or was it because they were playing an exhibition game?
No, I think it is a sign of better things to come, Adrian, because, you know, in covering a lot of the Munster games this year, even going right back to the first one, the Cardiff game, where you have a little bit of rust, a lot of the shape that they were trying to achieve was breaking down maybe with the second last pass or the last pass. And the more you rep things in training and the more confidence you get, and when you get a little bit of continuity in selection, these things start to improve a little bit. I think nobody is saying that Munster have incredible X-factor players and can go wide all the time. But the little wraparound passes and the type of passes were sticking a lot more. Of course, it broke down once or twice last night. South Africa were very aggressive in their line speed. But I think it's certainly a positive sign of better things to come, that, you know, they can keep the ball alive, and you can. Ireland are a perfect example as a team who've really kind of gone on to a different level in the way their shape is, their attack, the way their wingers come in off the sideline, and they can contribute as an extra man in that back line. And even with a very aggressive rush defence, that you have to make these passes and make sure they're on the money. So a lot of the time last night, people were kind of, going, wow, that's brilliant. These passes were sticking. So without getting too carried away, I think it's a continuation of what they were trying to do. And a lot of this stuff was breaking down in the last number of weeks. So it takes a little bit of time. You know, you have to remember, Adrian, these players were programmed into a direct approach, a kicking game, and not doing this on a continuous level. And you know, people talk about a change of game plan. I think the change of game plan is just better shape, and players who run dummy lines are an option to carry the ball as well, and just overall increasing that work rate and that fitness to get in better positions. And, you know, their offloads have improved, lots of parts of it. I think if you look at one of the stats in the first 7 games, scoring tries and scoring points have been a problem for them. So in one hand, it's been a strength, a real positive sign. On the other hand, then the stats would say that it's an area that they've been weak because they haven't been scoring points and tries. But I think if you analyse the games, you can see that shape is gradually coming and the players are getting a bit more comfortable. But that requires fitness and work rate. We spoke about that during a number of occasions. The players looked a little bit flat-footed and a little bit lethargic at the start, trying to play this type of game. Last night in dreadful conditions, and they executed it much better. So they've got to try and build on that.
One last one for me on that game before we go on to talk about Ireland. With Ben Healy, like looking at him last night, I was scratching my head wondering, how's this fella third choice at Munster, and how are they going to hang on to him in that position? He'll see plenty of game time, but maybe not for the bigger matches. What's the future for Ben Healy, do you think?
Well, someone like Ben Healy is a very talented player. I think he had a really poor cameo against Leinster when he came off the bench. Was soft in the tackle for Luke McGrath's try, dropped the ball twice, made a couple of mistakes, and that can happen anyone. It can happen anyone. But what Ben has to do is probably realise that you can't wait for a reaction every time. So that's the standard now. He was superb last night, even defensively, which is not one of his biggest strengths for a big man. He was really, really good last night. He had a little bit of edge to him. And you see, you know, when you're a young player, Adrian, I think, and Paul O'Connell always spoke to us about that, and I always was intrigued by what he said about getting the emotional balance right as a sports person. It's difficult to be really, really kind of psyched up and fired up. And Munster would have been psyched up and fired up last night with fear, the occasion, the team they're playing. And it generates a kind of a real spark inside you to be on it, you know, and to be really, really kind of up for the game. It's hard to do that every week, to get that big emotional fire going. And you learn it as young players as you go on to kind of get that to a really good level in the games that are hard to get motivated for, you know, in a sense where there is no crowd generating an atmosphere for you. It's wet, it's windy, you're missing internationals, you have a couple of injuries, and you step up to play a game. That's how you develop leadership as well, where you've got to step up in those games. And Ben is still learning himself, and he's a very talented player. And I think it was a really big performance from him last night. And I think what impressed me more is physically he put his body on the line, an area that he has struggled a little bit in. But overall, his distribution, the ambition to run with the ball as well was very good. So getting the emotional balance right, and I think without kind of dampening things in any way, because they've got to make sure that they take a lot of good stuff out of that game last night, stuff that worked from their cohesion, their work rate, the defensive line speed, the way they chopped the South Africans at times, the way they worked to get numbers in that defensive line and didn't allow South Africa move the ball, the way they double tackled. There's always things you can improve on, and when they look back, there'll be certain parts of the game that they need to get better in, but they've got to try and translate that into consistency, because you think most of that team last night, that's the team that will be playing when internationals are not available. Maybe there'll be a few back. Jean Klein, Thomas Ahern is out for a period of time. They'll be really hoping to get Snyman back, and Andrew Conway, Keith Earls, they'll play a couple of games, but they'll want to go back with Ireland. So that's the kind of standard they've got to set now. But look, they've got to enjoy last night. It was wonderful to see the players go around the field, kind of get that credit from the supporters, enjoy the night. It was a special occasion. They've had a tough start to the season. There's probably been a lot of long faces in a lot of those dressing rooms in those 5 losses that they've had in the league. So it's a learning curve for them, but I think there's cause to be optimistic, certainly with the way they played. And the coaches deserve credit as well, because, they've been working their socks off to try and make them better and make them more of an attacking force. And it wasn't all perfect last night, and they were under pressure for long periods, but it was, I think such a much improved performance and an exciting one. And they should enjoy it.
Talk to us about, obviously, the strong squad that's been named for the Ireland-Fiji game this weekend, and certainly a lot of the writing about it this morning, and you find it hard to get past it, is that it may be a case that the ship has sailed for players that might have been expected to have featured in that squad but blotted their copybook a little bit against the All Blacks 15s, and specifically you have to look at the likes of Lowry, Stockdale, Nash, Hume, McCarthy, Coombs. There's almost no chance now again for them to impress before the World Cup.
It's difficult for them, isn't it? I think they'll still be in their own squad and still in Andy Farrell's thoughts, and he won't write them off. So they've got to play well with their provinces now. Every chance they get between here and the Six Nations, and hope for a break, get some consistency. Those derby matches at Christmas, they count for a lot between the 4 provinces. But yeah, you think there's an opportunity lost there. Someone like Gavin Coombs going back to Munster this week. He was very lucky that he had a game to play against South Africa to kind of switch the focus and get back and play again. But it's a great opportunity for Jeremy Loughman, isn't it? And, Cian Prendergast, Jack Crowley, Nick Timoney, they were all involved in that game. And there was never a case of 8 or 10 of them were going to come straight in for Fiji. This is a bit of a potential banana skin, and these are the ones where I'm talking about that emotional kind of pitch that you've got to get right. Everyone expects us to win. Fiji were, for 40, 50 minutes last week against Scotland, they were very, very good, caused Scotland a lot of problems. Scotland protected the ball much better and stressed them and held on to it for long periods, and then they found gaps and opportunities. But it's a very strong Irish side, but again, it's a tough one for those players that, as you say, historically this was the one that they'd all get an opportunity in. Yeah. But I'm glad Andy Farrell there's a lot of experience and quality in there, as well as, inexperience and players who don't have a lot of caps. Tyke Furlong, 61 caps, playing with Herring and Loughman is a really kind of a sensible one, because you're putting in that kind of cornerstone of the Irish pack with Herring and Loughman. Obviously, Herring has 29 caps for Ireland. He's a very good player. But I think, if you had 3 new changes across the front row, would have put a bit more pressure on Loughman. And, Tyke Byrne playing in the second row with Treadwell as well. If you put in Joe McCarthy there, then you've 2 kind of non-starters in there. So I think they've got the balance right of the team. Caelan Doris in the back row and Conan. Conan's a big game for him, big opportunity as well. He'll want to try and get back into that starting team. And dare we say it, Carberry at 10. So, I'm delighted for Stuart McCluskey. I think everyone thought that injury was serious last week, and it's a great chance for him and Henshaw again. So when you go through the team, I think you'd expect all these wholesale changes, but I think there's a lovely mix of really experienced players in there as well.
Quinny, we saw the brilliant clip of Tyke Furlong chatting to our own Aisling O'Reilly yesterday at the press conference, where clearly moved by getting the captaincy for this game, albeit it's a one-off game, but he talked about his family, what it means to them and his friends back home in Wexford and everyone. But such a special moment in his career, and again, it's not a full-time captaincy role, but it's something that must mean a lot to a player to get that armband for their country.
Yeah, of course, and I think he's been incredible for a long number of years now, world class, and it's a nice. He's a very humble guy, I think, and does his job so well every week he plays, and finds that fire and that spark to really perform. He's been so consistent, and he's kind of gained the respect of everyone worldwide with his performance. So he's a real natural leader in the team as well, and in the way he goes about his business. So it's a big moment for him, very special moment for him. And who knows, after Johnny hangs up the boots, maybe he will be putting his hand up and looking for the captaincy. So, but it's a special moment for him, his family, his club, tomorrow, and they'll certainly celebrate that.
Just looking forward a little bit, Quinny, as well, with everything that we've been discussing in the mix, and you mentioned particularly maybe the opportunity for the likes of Lockman and maybe Crowley off the bench. Like, it's surely a key indicator that he has them in his considerations for France. With all that in the mix, to project forward a small bit, does Andy Farrell end up showing a full hand against Australia as well? Or are you better looking at some of the players that are definitely, for example, most probably in a 23 for a World Cup game? Like, does he go full bore first 15 pick for Australia, or is there some of the 23 starting?
Possibly some changes. I wouldn't go for wholesale changes. I think they need to finish off the block well, but with Johnny Sexton not being involved this week, he'll be wanting to start next week. He is the team captain. I think there's an argument to look at playing Joey Carberry next week and starting him against Australia and giving him another run out there. I think he's had, up till that France game last year, probably 4 starts against Tier 1 nations teams at fly half. So it'd be great to get a couple of more starts under his belt. But for me, I think 1 or 2 tweaks here and there. You'd love to be in a situation, Adrian, where you're kind of rotating players like for like, and that's the whole beauty that any coach would want to develop in any sport, is to try and get big talking points about certain positions, and then be able to play one week and play a different one the next week, and really kind of have that drive and that kind of motivation to go on and try and hold on to your place. But I don't think we'll see wholesale changes, and I think between here and now it's probably about developing more options. Hence Jeremy Lockman is getting a start. There's a couple of areas, Ian Henderson coming back into that second row shout gives James Ryan, Tyg Byrne, that area a little bit more strength. It's an area of concern for me. I think midfield, there's a lot of, with McCluskey playing so well this year. Chris Farrell is out of the picture at the moment. But, you could argue that Craig Casey probably should be starting this game as well, even though it was a tough night for him behind the pack against the New Zealand side. So, look, you can argue some of them there. But there's a couple of players that may, I wouldn't be against starting him against Australia next week, and you can still have the experienced guy, the regular starter on the bench, to change it up a little bit. And Joe Schmidt did that in 2018, and in the second test in Melbourne against Australia, he made 4 or 5 changes there his bench players started. So maybe that will happen next week.
Yeah, it might be an ideal prep. Quinny, thanks a million. Going, those chickens aren't going to look after themselves.
They're all done. I'll bring up some eggs for you, Adrian.
A few eggs would be perfect. Good man. Nice free range from Tip. Good man. Cheers, Quinny.
Cheers, lads.
Right, we shall see. I think that will be I think this weekend is just about getting over the hurdle, and then into the Australia game. That'll be sort of one of the last major preparation games, you would think, obviously outside of competition, ahead of the World Cup. There's about 8 games, something like that, left between now and then. So let's see how all that pans out. 13 minutes past 9 Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mow. You can sign up now to Movember at Movember.com. OTB Sports Radio across the day. Here's what's coming your way. This morning we're going to have a crappy quiz in a little bit. You'll have football kick-off as well from 11:30, where the lads will be looking ahead to the weekend's games, marking your card as well, about their thoughts about how those games stack up. 1 o'clock OTB Gold will be Emmanuel Petit in conversation with Joe from a couple of years ago. Mount Rushmore is South Dublin. Is today's selection at 3 o'clock. Dublin against Kerry from 05 is the Classic Game Club at 4, and then at 6 o'clock the Life and Times of the great Johnny Kilban is OTB Gold from 6. I did see somebody saying that if we were doing or statues in Castlebar, I think it was Castlebar, that Kilban, the Kevin variety, would have to be in the mix.
Fair, or Westport, yeah, he'd have to be. He'd be up there surely, and Johnny Kilban. 2 Kilbans, and then you'll have 2 of the Mayo football greats over the years.
Keir MacDonald.
Yeah, swinging it over from the left boot. Don't get into this because it's going to be controversial.
Spectre Corps, Kevin Kilban statue in Castlebar. I mean, maybe he's just suggesting you put it in the main street in Castlebar.
Fair.
And just be done with it.
Yeah. Just Kevin. That's grand, yeah, I agree.
You'd have to get him back in Canada is the first thing.
Of course. He'll have a statue in Toronto. That's soon enough.
Looks unlikely.
Yeah.
Righto, we have loads still to come. We're going to be talking to Siobhán Doyle, who's the author of this lovely book, A History of the GA in 100 Objects. And we won't quite do 100 this morning, but we will give you a bit of a flavour as to what's going on. That's coming your way next.
Is Blatter bitter about the awarding of the World Cup to Qatar?
Yes, I think it's fair to say he is bitter. I think he perceives, perhaps even correctly, that Russia was something that he could have gotten away with. In fact, there were many people saw Russia as a kind of perfectly legitimate candidate for that. I have every reason to believe that Blatter voted for it. But as far as he sees it, Qatar being awarded the World Cup was the fatal flaw. And I think there are a few people in his administration who come forward and said that in the doc, that basically the Qatar-Russia 1-2 punch with the second punch of Qatar was just too much for them to overcome, that it added a level of scrutiny that no one was really ready for. And I think, I think he possibly even thinks he could still be in charge, or could have been in charge up until recently. Remember, again, the US go to make all these arrests in 2015 in Zurich, and he stands for election a couple of days later and wins. So this is he thought he was basically above all of this. And I think he sees, when he says it's a mistake, I think that's a polite way of saying it was a mistake for me because I lost my job.
So his issue wasn't that the FIFA technical report had described it as high risk and was extremely negative. His issue was that he wasn't the one pulling the strings anymore.
One of the most heartbreaking interviews in all of this, and it's a very small detail, was with the man who wrote the bid book, a Chilean by the name of Harold Maid-Nichols. And he describes how no one spoke to him about the bid book. He describes how basically it was irrelevant. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The executive committee members weren't reading it. And I think that shows for everyone, including for Blatter, that the 21 other executive committee members were just not taking anything into account other than what worked best for them. That this was a purely political decision, that this was that many of them were just trying to get a good deal for themselves out of it.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Rugby.
Do you know when you dream as a young fella, you want to play for Ireland, you want to play for Leinster, you want to play for the Lions? I never even dreamed of Captain Ireland.
What did you dream?
Spuds, gravy, mother's Sunday roast. Just playing for Ireland, you know what I mean? It was never...
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM with Gillette, in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
All right, it is 18 minutes past 9. You're watching OTB AM. Delighted to have you along with us, and thanks a million for all the comments that are coming to us this morning across the various topics. This is a beautiful production. It's called A History of the GAA in 100 Objects. It does exactly what it says in the tin, and its author, Siobhán Doyle, is in studio with us this morning. Morning, Siobhán.
Morning,
Thanks a million for coming in. It's a cracker of a little book. It's like eminently pick-upable, and you can sort of dip in and out. You don't have to sit down and read it, but recommend don't sit down and read it all in one go. What's your favourite item in the book?
I can't be saying that.
Come on now.
So picking your favourite child.
Only thing I want to know.
It changes on a given day. One of them actually is Doreen McVurku. She was a sports reporter for Radio on the Gaeltachta.
Yeah.
And she used to go to matches on her Honda 50, and she used to ring in the results on like a payphone. But one of the objects is a press pass that she had to make herself, because the stewards in the grounds wouldn't believe that a woman would be reporting on the matches. So, you know, the thoughts of her sitting down with her scissors and her paper and her glue, trying to make this make-do press pass until her official one came through. So that to me was a really important story to tell about, I suppose, the plight of women when it comes to GA in the media and stuff like that.
We've all had to make up fake ID at some point.
There you go.
I've sort of picked out a few things that I thought were really interesting to talk about, so I think we'll just throw a few at you if that's all right.
No bother.
I've gone for number one as the first one that I've picked. It's the wooden mether, and people will be able to see it on screen there. Like, it looks like the obvious, and that was kind of why it jumped out for me. The design that Liam McCarthy is based off, basically, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's a four-handled wooden vessel that's in the collection, the National Museum of Ireland. Don't have a date on it, it's just generically medieval.
Okay.
But a lot of the trophies that we see are based on that design. But wooden methers would have been used at like medieval feasts and passed around so that everyone in the room could get a drink out of the cup.
Yeah.
So we also get a bit of that in GA as well. We're not supposed to. 12-week ban.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that actually, or if I was, I'd forgotten about it.
Yeah, but I also wanted to include that to demonstrate that, you know, the GA didn't just start on the 1st November in 1884. It was, you know, there's lots of objects that represent times before that. So we have hair hurling balls from 800 years ago. We've paintings of handball being played in Monaghan from the 1700s. So there's lots of things, lots of objects around that predate the GA in 1884.
And Liam McCarthy gifted it 6 years before his death, and it was made by jewellers and Grafton Street.
That's right.
There's all these little detail about this thing that just appears, that everybody goes, oh, well, sure, that's that thing. It's like always been there. It's a lovely little detail. And Leitrim, the party poopers, wanted the drink. They wanted they wanted to change, so there were that point that you made about the ban. They were like, we need to stop people drinking out of it.
And they quoted, to curb the evils of drinking, they wanted the GA to bring in cups that had a lid glued to them.
No way.
So that, you know, it couldn't be passed around. So needless to say, it didn't go through at Congress.
I can't believe Leitrim, like, I mean, it's just because they win nothing, they're like,
harsh. Yeah, but fair. Yeah.
The Croke Park map is the next one that I want to have a look at. It will show it up on screen there for people. And again, like, as I said, some of these things are about the item and some of them are about the story behind the item, but a really interesting history of how that ground came into the hands of the GAA.
Yeah, like, we've a stunning national stadium today of international standard, but it came from humble beginnings. You know, a man called Frank Deneen Brazel bought the grounds at Jones's Road with his own money, because the GAA couldn't afford it. He sold his farm in Ballylanders in County Limerick and loaned the GAA the money to buy it. An incredibly generous gesture on his part, so I just wanted to make sure that he was represented as well. So that map of Croke Park very much tells the story of, you know, humble beginnings, and now we have a fantastic stadium as the headquarters of our games.
It went to a vote of Central Council as to whether they should buy it or not, and it was like
scraped
overwhelmingly through by a vote. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. I think if we have the picture there, we'll throw it up on screen just to give people a bit of a sense of the area at that time around Croke Park and the piece of land, the pocket of it that the Deneen guy from Limerick, he had bought a section of it, is that right? And then more of it belonged to...
Yeah, exactly. And they gradually started buying more and more when it came up. But the hill is named after him as well. It's called Deneen Hill 16 in his name, but it kind of gets lost because it's just handier to say the hill. So it's important that, you know, his story is brought through as well.
That's it's probably bit far away. People get a bit of a sense of the blue bit was the Dunedin bit, and then the rest of it was belonging to the Jesuits, whatever the case might be. It's lovely, lovely little story around that. The Dublin County Board minutes and the Secretary's report, particularly, that appears once a year at the minute, and everybody gets great reading out of. Is a great thing to read. But that was one of the other ones, and particularly how it pertained to the selection of county colours.
Yeah,
which is again one of these things that just appears, and you just accept it as norm. But
yeah, and it's something we mightn't even think about. So in 1913, the GA insisted that every team formally pick their county colours. So some teams like Dublin got to pick their colours. So that was blue and white, and that's what the minutes in the book represents. Harry Boland was chairman of Dublin GA at the time. So
signature on the minutes and all. It's
exactly.
Incredible.
Yeah, so all these different people from history kind of creeping into these objects as well. But I suppose the whole point is to show that it might just be to look at it on paper, it might just be a mundane report, but when we dig deeper, there's so many layers and so many stories to tell.
You must have been driving up and down the country to get all these stories.
Yeah,
it must have been serious amount of research.
My trusty Corolla brought me down roads and borings I've never been before. I'll probably never be again. But yeah, I travelled in 32 counties. I wanted to make sure that every county was represented, and thankfully it worked. But it was basically every weekend for about 9 months. But it was great crack.
Yeah,
had a great
I can
time.
imagine, because you nearly have to be in person meeting people for these stories to really come through. It's one thing chatting on Zoom or the phone or whatever, but you have to meet up.
And where possible, I went to see the objects, whether they're in museums or private collections or whatever. But like that, when you're talking to people, when you're talking to the owners, and you kind of gain a bit of trust, they give you a bit more information.
The line that I loved from that thing was the description of how it all came about. After some discussion, it was decided to adopt as the county colours a light blue jersey with a white shield bearing the city arms, which I presume is the crest. And the Assistant Secretary was directed to register same with the Leinster and Central Councils and to procure quotations for the supply of 2 sets of jerseys. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
As simple as that.
So simple.
We go.
And there it is, yeah.
You mentioned the chance nature of some of the other counties and how they came about their colours, including Cork.
Yeah.
Everybody would have been sort of assumed that the blood and bandage and all that stuff was, but it was real chance sort of encounter.
Yeah, Cork wore blue and white for many years, and then during the revolutionary years, with their offices were ransacked and the jerseys were robbed, and they had to borrow them from another team, and then it just ended up in red and white. The same with many counties and many teams. A lot of it came about from a clash of colours in a big match, and then one of them had to change, and they just stuck with it. Some of it is superstitious as well. They had to change, and then they won the match, so we'll keep wearing that jersey. But there's loads of stories like that.
Yeah, they're great. The overage minor players was the other thing from the Dublin County Board. It was like, geez, some things never change.
Yeah, there was a lot of that back in the day,
one of the other ones I wanted to mention was the poster banning GA events. So this was the 11th of May 1916, which in the historical context of everything that had gone 2 weeks beforehand is an incredible piece to have included.
Yeah, so posters were a really important way of communicating warnings and things to do and what not to do. And one of the posters in the book is one, as you said, from 1916 that was banning GA events because the British authorities saw them as a threat, as an excuse for people to get together and plot other things.
It's mad because that's in the thick of it. James Connolly, I think, was shot on the 12th, like the next day. So you're literally right in the middle of such a historic moment.
In the thick of it, yeah, absolutely.
And there's loads of context around how all that came about. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about was the John Joe Doyle's goggles.
Yeah.
And there was also another item which was must have been was the first hurling helmet. Certainly looked like the first one.
It was actually a motorcycle helmet.
Was it adopted?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
The goggles, first of all, were belonged to a man called John Joe Goggles Doyle. He played for Clare in the 1910s and for Newmarket and Fergus, but he wore glasses, and there was no contact lenses then, no helmets. So he made goggles to protect his glasses. They're made out of bicycle spokes and medical plasters. He just made them himself.
It looks like it might be a danger to you.
Yeah.
Itself.
It looks like the bicycle spokes would do much more damage than any hurl to his face. But very fondly nicknamed Goggles Doyle after that. And then in the 60s, we have in Cork a player for UCC. He suffered a head injury, and then he decided to take matters into his own hands and source a helmet, but there were no helmets. So he used a motorcycle helmet and went on as a sub in a Cork County final. You can imagine, you know, what people were saying on the sidelines, who's this lad coming in? But you know, even though helmets weren't mandatory until much late, you know, it was only kind of recently enough, 2009, you know, there were murmurings of head protection like in the 1960s.
Was there? Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's a very sad story. Tip were playing Kilkenny in an All-Ireland final in, can't remember, his 60s or 70s, but one of the Kilkenny players, Tommy Walsh, lost an eye in the All-Ireland final. Right. So that kind of got conversations going, and we see players starting to wear helmets. So it took something like that for the conversations to start.
That's the I was very rudely flicking through the book as you were talking, Siobhán. That's what I was after. That's give people an idea of exactly how what that looked like.
Yeah.
Is there a feeling that sorry, which came first, the goggles or the
goggles?
The goggles came first. Is there a feeling that you're very sure about that? Is there a feeling that was like the first iteration of what ultimately became the helmet, or is there? Is there?
Yeah,
right, okay.
Like it took a while. You know, it was still kind of frowned upon to wear protection and to wear a helmet, but
only until very recently, culturally, it became like you know, the hard man. Even obviously they brought it in so that no matter what age grade you're playing on, you have to wear one. I guess.
And it's bizarre to think, you know, that even the thoughts of going out without a helmet now is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Is there something in it that people always talk to you about? Is there a standout thing that people like?
John 37 sign is getting a lot lot of talk. You know, because one we kind of all identify with. It's pretty much iconic. It's very visibly iconic. John 37, a famous Limerick supporter, used to go to all the matches and spread the word of God by having a big sign with the verse on it. But that actually came from 1987 when he was watching Pat Cash getting the trophy at Wimbledon, and he spotted someone with a similar sign in the background. He said, I'm going to do that.
Okay, right. And he got away with it for years.
He sure did.
Yeah.
Good word it that way. It'd be interesting to see if you were to introduce that thing into Croke Park now with some sort of a statement.
Well, there was a story of him getting stopped at a pretty big match, a quarter-final or a semi-final a few years ago. A steward stopped him and said, no, you can't come in, and he didn't go into the match. He walked off and went home, and then the GA had to come out, or Croke Park had to come out the following week and said, no, you're more than welcome to come in. But I think he was the exception. They weren't encouraging everyone to bring in extremely large placards.
Yeah, of course.
First thing when you landed in, I was like, I have a couple of things at home. I think it would be perfect. So I presume everybody's saying to you, I have stuff that, you know, so what's next?
What's next? I'd love to expand it to other sports because Ireland has an incredibly rich sporting history, and as a historian I kind of worry about all the stuff that's locked away in people's attics and in museum stores and stuff like that, so it's definitely only the start of something. Okay, well, it's an absolute cracker production. It's out in perfect time for Christmas, so I highly recommend, if you're a GAA fan at all, it's definitely the sort of thing you want for the GAA fan in your life, that you can dip in and have a bit of a read. There's some great information in it, lovely stories. Siobhán, thanks a million for coming in. Let's look at the next project. Cheers. Chat to you down the line. It is 9:30. You've been watching OTB AM over the last little while with myself and Shane. Good man, Shane.
Cheers.
Enjoy the weekend.
Absolutely.
Do you wear those things over the weekend, or do you
dodgy shirts
for production purposes?
I'd probably wear worse over the weekend.
Would you?
Yeah. Go out on a Saturday night and wear something dodgy. Nothing wrong with it. That's
an indictment right there. We're going to be back with you Monday morning with more of the good stuff, of course, reacting to all the weekend sport as well. And a reminder that we're brought to you live each morning with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now on Movember.com. Needless to say, we'll have full reaction to all of that sport we've been chatting about this morning on Monday's show with Ger. Actually, I think it's myself and Nathan.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. We'll see you on Monday morning. Good luck.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo.
Okay,